start at 9:30. Time has arrived. And the program is as follows. At 9:30, we were going to see Ms. Nkosi, who is a former General Manager, Labour Relations. Thereafter, we're going to see a Mr. Maaso, who is a former Group Executive Human Resources. Thereafter, we're going to see Mr. Masinga, who deals with technology-related matters at the SABC, also a former employee. And then at 4 o'clock, we're going to see Ms. Nkulube, Ms. Pillay, Mr. Mvoko, and Mr. Kalata, who will be representing what has now been known as the SABC 8. And then, of course, at the close of business, we'll indicate what the program is for Tuesday, for Wednesday, and for Thursday. So that's the program for this afternoon. It's a full day as usual, members, and thus we must start. We've not received any apologies from any member, no? No apologies, we're all here, thank you very much. Honourable members, no, there's a standing apology for Honourable Waters. He's on other parliamentary business, so that's a standing apology that has been noted. Thank you very much. As has become a custom, Honourable members, we want to bring you up to speed and seek your mandate. In certain instances, we last met on Friday, so it's an update and a mandate where mandates are necessary. We've just gone through the program and nobody has indicated that they need the program changed, so that program will stand for the rest of the day. Honourable members, we on Friday served summons on Professor Maguve. And I've been informed that that was duly done. So that's where it is in terms of the summons on Professor Maguve. Indications, as I'm sitting now, are that those summonses have been served, and we will take it from there. Honourable members, on Saturday, the 10th of December, my office received a letter from Ingube Incorporated Attorneys addressed to the chairperson. And it is headed Re-Inquiry by the Ad Hoc Committee into the Affairs of the South African Broadcasting Corporation and its Board of Directors. I want to summarize the 4 key elements that were raised and how I propose to respond, and with your mandate and with your wisdom, we will strengthen it and send it off, because as is practice from this office, we don't sit on correspondence. We want to send that correspondence out as soon as you've given us the mandate. Honourable members, the first point they raise is we wish to reiterate that the SABC board is of the view that the inquiry must be fair and impartial. So that's the first point they raise. The second point they raise, the SABC wishes to inform the Ad Hoc Committee that on the 15th of December 2016, the SABC, and this is the important part, the SABC shall lead evidence and cross-examine all witnesses that we've called. I want to repeat, honourable members, their letter says the SABC shall lead and cross-examine all witnesses, and we'll deal with that in my proposed response. The third point they make in the letter is that they indicate, when I say they, I'm talking about the advocates, NUBE attorneys, that is in the interest of the ad hoc committee that the SABC given an opportunity to participate in these proceedings, and we'll respond to that. The fourth point that they make is that should our rights to participate not be granted, the SABC shall exercise any right in the law or otherwise to enforce its rights. So that's the content of the letter, dated the 10th of December 2016 from NUBE Incorporated. Honourable members, I think you've been given a copy of this letter. The first thing that we must note is that this letter is not signed. It, in the letter, says electronically sent, not signed. So that's the letter and the concerns that they raised with the chairperson on Saturday, the 10th. And I indicated, honourable members, that I will, or we should respond before close of business today to keep the process smooth. And I want to put to you what I propose, or how I propose to respond, without giving you all the T's and the I's, but the sentiment, and then you could add to and or subtract from. I think the first point that we want to highlight, honourable members, is that in light of the fact that the SABC board is incorrect, where does the mandate derive and who is going to pay for it? I think it's the first point that we must raise and we must consistently raise. On the point of they wish to reiterate that the process is fair and impartial. Honourable members, you'll recall that our very first letter and our very first utterances were that we will do everything in our power to make sure that it's transparent, that it's free, that it's fair, and in fact we have championed that. So we will reassure them that that's exactly what's going to happen, because that has been what the committee has said from day one. The third point that they raise, honourable members, is that on Thursday, the 15th of December, 2016, the SABC shall lead evidence and cross-examine all the witnesses called by the ad hoc committee throughout the inquiry, with the exception of the Public Protector, ICASA, and the Auditor General. For those three, they will just comment. But every other witness that has been called, they shall, on the 15th, lead and cross-examine. Honourable members, my own view is that Section 57 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, also Rule 167 of the Rules of Parliament, state that the National Assembly and its committees will determine our internal workings. We will determine and we will control our internal workings. Constitution, Section 57, Rules of the National Assembly says we shall determine and control, we being the committee. I did read to you the program that we've all adopted earlier on. And therefore, honourable members, my own view is that nobody will determine what this committee will do on the 15th or any other day. That's my view. Informed by the rules of Parliament and informed by the Constitution. So I am not inclined to grant them that. But I will be guided by you. In terms of the third point, that it is in the interest of this ad hoc committee that the SABC participate in the proceedings. I will continue, honourable members, to go back to what we did at the beginning. We wrote a letter to every potential witness, including the Minister and the SABC board. And we indicated in that letter that we will call witnesses, and the SABC board and the Minister will have an opportunity to test the evidence given to us immediately. That letter was sent to the witnesses, to the board, and to the Minister. That immediately you will be granted an opportunity to interact with the evidence that has just been given to this committee. Everybody remembers that on the 7th of December, when we started these proceedings, the SABC board was in the meeting. And they chose to walk out of their own violation. When they would have been granted an opportunity to interact, they chose to walk out. And from where I'm sitting, I believe that is a forfeiture of their rights, at least to have interacted with those witnesses up to that point. But let me reiterate that all future witnesses that appear, they will have the right to interact with as and when the witnesses come. And for them, being the board and the Minister, the invitation for them to attend all hearings still stands. The final point I want to make on that, honourable members, is that as we respond to that, I think it's incumbent upon this committee to make it absolutely clear to the SABC board and to Professor Maguve that they are walking out of this meeting on the 7th of December shows total disrespect for Parliament and the Constitution. And we should indicate that in our letter. Total disrespect for Parliament and the Constitution, that a body that accounts to this institution behaves in the manner that they've behaved. The final point, honourable members, that they raise about their right to exercise whatever they deem necessary in the event that they do not get a satisfactory answer. I think we should say categorically that we respect the right of every South African citizen to do whatever they deem is important. So we have no problem with the SABC, we have no problem with Professor Maguve, we have no problem with any South African exercising their right if they think that what we have done to date would have infringed on any right. So that is how I intend to respond, honourable members. Unless you dictate otherwise, we will draft a letter accordingly, send it off to Ngube Incorporated attorneys, and indicate to them that they should respond to us by close of business on Tuesday, if they so wish. Let me open up for comment from members. I beg your pardon. I should, ma'am, sorry, ma'am Nkosi. We just have this in-house, will be 15 minutes. I'm so sorry that we've called you up. I beg your pardon, ma'am. Honourable Chauke, who's taking this? Chauke, Loliwe, everybody wants to speak? All right. In light of everybody wanting to speak, can we agree that you are limited to no more than 2 minutes, if in your input? Once again, we'll start with Chauke, and we'll do as we normally do. Chauke, Killian, Loliwe and company, and then we'll end up with you, Honourable Mokoena. 2 minutes starts now, sir.
No, I'm not going to be long, Chair, but the point that I want to bring in is that What we have just alluded to, in fact, they demonstrate that there is total no respect to Parliament by the SABC together with the chairman of that board. We have given the SABC an opportunity to participate from the start of the hearing. Now, what has happened, Chair, is that when they left this meeting, they have not even notified the committee, neither yourself, that they are now leaving. They will not be participating. Throughout the whole hearing, Chair, you have made space available. You have made calls to check if SABC is present in the meeting. It's clear that there is no commitment from the side of the SABC. Now, my take, therefore, Chair, is that you need to be very clear to that executive of the SABC. This is public money that they're going to be spending that is going to constitute what you call fruitless and wasteful expenditure to call any other witness again. That process has passed. My take, therefore, Chair, is that we must just be firm. We must not even accept to be bullied by SABC. They even determine the terms. They're telling us that, in fact, on the 15th, this is what they want to do. Where did you see this thing happening? Now, they have undermined the authority of Parliament. They have undermined the constitution of the country. And I think that I stick to our guns that because they are given that opportunity, we will not be able to give them any other opportunity to call witnesses again. Those witnesses, they were here, they were supposed to be here, they were not here. SABC was supposed to be here from the start to the end of this process. So they must not treat us like we school children who don't know what we are doing. We know our role here, and therefore I'm saying that take it in the manner that we have just outlined and make it very clear to them. We are not going to be bullied by them.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to concur with the sentiments expressed by Honourable Chauke. I would just like to add that I think it's important for us to say also that they have the right in law, once we have completed the process, obviously, as you have indicated, to approach a court. But we must also make it abundantly clear that it should be done at the cost of those individuals who are affected. Because we don't have a core rate board, no board can take a decision to fight any matter in court. And therefore, those who are taking the matter on review will have to do it, and they have to fund those processes by themselves. Fact of the matter is, the SABC made a 400 million loss in the last financial year. And it is important that we stop the looting of resources at the SABC, and this committee is really set on doing just that. So I think it's very important that they must get the message. We are bending over backwards to give them an opportunity. We have done so. Henceforth, they can continue, but we won't go back in the process. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Oliwe.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I agree with my colleagues. I see this letter as just a way of grandstanding by the institution. There's no way that for the whole of last week we have been extending a hand to them saying anyone who wants to question witnesses can take that opportunity and do so. And now they make it as if they were deprived of doing this. We have granted them that, and we are not going back to where we started because they decided to walk out when they were afforded an opportunity to be part of this particular process. As this committee, we adopted a program, and we are going to move according to our adopted program. Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Khoza.
Chair, I agree with you, and I think I'm sure the entire committee concurs with you. I don't think this level of impunity should be tolerated. Whatever tactics that SABC is going to be coming up with, we need to brace up for that, Chair, and we should not tolerate that. in the first instance, they are in contravention of Section 55 of the Constitution. All organs of state are accountable to Parliament. No organ of state is exempted from this, and I think it is absolutely important that we send this message to SABC and they understand that they have forfeited their right to cross-examine the witnesses when they were given the opportunity to do so. And going forward, yes, they may come back. It's up to them if they decide to come back, but this is not going to stop this train.
Honourable Van Daan.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with previous speakers. From day one, they were allowed to be here. On day one, all 17 people actually that are here from the SABC staged a dramatic walkout in complete disrespect of this committee. As you've said, the invitation still stands. But I actually don't think that letter was sent on good faith. Because if they'd realized their error, they shouldn't have walked out. They would now like to be given the opportunity to interview witnesses. Where are they? They're not here. So I view that letter as yet another delaying tactic. We should not steer off course. We're going to continue with our work. They were given the opportunity, and they still are. If they want to, they must come.
Honourable Maaso.
Chair, thank you. No, I like the fact that they wrote this letter on the day on which we were celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Constitution. Indeed, this confirms that our Constitution and people are really trying to exercise their rights. But on a serious note, Chair, the first question that comes into mind, because I listened to what you have said, you're saying the SABC would like to do this. The first question that comes to mind is, who is this SABC? It's a very important question. But the second issue that, Chair, that colleagues have already said, every day we've allowed them to be in the meeting and to engage with the process. They elected to abandon the process. It's their decision, and I think we respect their decision, and we will make informed decisions based on what we have heard and their decision to elect. But we must, for record, indicate that their bullying tactic is reprehensible. It is unacceptable. And my view is that theirs is an egregious action or attempt to undermine the process, a constitutional process as well as a legal process. And I guess they, as the colleague have said, I think they can proceed with the process as they like, but no state money or public money should be used. If they want to do it out of their own pockets, granted. So the monkey tricks, I think, must come to an end.
Honourable Swartz.
Thank you, Chair. I still have and I'm sure many members have a very open mind about this inquiry and the outcome of the inquiry, but I do find this letter very disturbing, and the way the SABC has conducted itself, from walking out, from the chairperson not responding to our letters, and then us having to issue a summons to have him appear. And now this letter, I find it outrageous. In the many years that I've been in Parliament, I've never seen an institution that says here, the SABC shall lead evidence and cross-examine on the day that they choose. I've never seen that before. So, Chair, whilst they have got certain rights, to dictate to Parliament is totally unacceptable, and I'm in total agreement with my colleagues across all political parties, let it be added, that find this outrageous. I am in agreement with you that Section 57 of the Constitution and Rule 167 of the Rules of Parliament say we, Parliament, dictate our rules, and that an institution like the SABC is accountable to us. So I'm in total agreement with the sentiments expressed by my colleagues. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honourable Mokoena.
Thanks, Chair. I think the first thing is that Ncube attorneys need to explain to us who gave them instructions. Because for all we know, they could be getting instructions from the cleaner at the SABC. Maybe they're getting it from Claudi Mutweneng, who doesn't have a legal foot to instruct anyone to speak to Parliament. Whoever whoever Ncube attorneys is representing, they need to explain to us. Because the effect of that is that if indeed it is a member of this defunct board, then they must show us a resolution that was taken by the board to appoint this legal body to represent them here. Because if they can't do that, then it means that they are spending money of the SABC unlawfully. And we must then go back and say they must pay back that money from their own personal pockets. Whoever instructed Ncube attorneys to come and write us this frivolous letter here must take personal responsibility for that letter that they've written. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, honourable members. We shall draft a letter encapsulating all your sentiments. That letter will go out. I'm looking at the legal team. If you can assist us, that letter should go out by close of business today. The final point, honourable members, on Saturday, and I keep on raising this thing of Saturday. I'm not sure if Saturday is a working day. I don't know. But on Saturday, we received more than 400 documents from the SABC via email, purportedly being documents that we required in preparation for our work. So we are processing those documents to try and ascertain exactly what they contain, and at the earliest convenience we will share them with you, that these 400 documents represent these aspects of what we required from the SABC. It's going to be a very tall order, but I'm sure with the team we'll be able to give you some indication what those documents. I just find it very strange that documents, letters, all sorts of things that could hamper our work get sent on a weekend. I find it strange that those things happen over the weekend. But I thought, let me raise that with you, and we will try and get them. Hopefully you'll get some so that you can prepare for the proceedings from tomorrow onwards. I doubt you'll get any for today, but bear with us. So those 400, the team is busy working on them, and you shall get them as soon as we can get them through to you. Having said that, Ms. Nkosi, apologies that you had to go through the normal housekeeping routine, but please be welcome to our hearing. Former General Manager of Labour Relations. And now that you're here, Ms. Nkosi, please be informed that by law, you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside of Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Ms. Nkosi, I've been informed that you have opted to take the oath, so if you could repeat after me, put your mic on. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence that I shall give.
Will be the truth.
will be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Please say, so help me God. Raise your hand.
So help me God.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vanara, it's just past 11 o'clock. Can you... Past 10 o'clock, I beg your pardon. Can you try and get through your proceedings by 11:15, Mr. Vanara, if it's at all possible? Then we'll allow members again. Maybe Mr. Honorable Mokwena, prepare because we'll start with you. Okay. Advocate.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to Ms. Ngosi. Ms. Ngosi, can you, for the record, just tell the committee your full particulars?
Okay, my name is Mandiwe Nkosi, and as you already said, I am the former General Manager of Employee Relations at the SABC. Currently, I'm unemployed.
When do you start working for the SABC, and when was your relationship with the SABC terminated?
So I started the SABC in 2011, the 1st of July 2011, and my last working day was the 28th of September of 2016.
What was the position that you held?
I started at the SABC, and at the time I left the SABC, I still was the General Manager of Employee Relations. Same as labor relations, I think, as indicated, just semantics.
Can you explain to the committee what that role entailed, and to whom did you report to?
Okay, so my responsibilities are basically twofold. I deal with individual disputes of the SABC, and I deal with all matters of collective bargaining, as I am heading the Employee Relations Department. I report to the, or at least used to report to the Group Executive Human Resources. So I would give advice that is labor law, labor relations related to all and sundry, including the executives of the SABC, as well as all the employees of the SABC. So in a nutshell, if the matter goes to the Labour Court or CCMA, or there's a disciplinary inquiry, there would be some level of advice that I give to the SABC.
I would like us to focus on the dispute resolution function. You are aware that there has been quite a number of group executives that recently had their relationship with the corporation terminated. I would like you to just tell us the circumstances and your role in those instances. I'm referring to Mr. Itani Tseisi, I'm referring to Ms. Duwaka, there's Jabu Mabaso, Leslie Ntoko, and the former Chief Audit Executive.
So, as I indicated before, mostly my role would be that of advising the SABC on the processes that need to be taken. And I should hasten to say that the advice that I would give is obviously dependent upon what is before me, that which is given to me for me to advise. And so in respect of the executives that you have mentioned, and perhaps if I could start with SIPO just briefly, is that I advised on SIPO's, I'm not sure where to start, but on SIPO's transaction, I'll call it that for purposes of this.
Sorry, who's SIPO?
SIPO Masinga would have been the group executive of technology within the SABC. So I normally get called in for such positions by the executive directors of the SABC, in this instance mostly by the then COO of the SABC, Mr. Claude Mutsoning. And in most cases, he would either be with the CFO, Mr. James Aguma, or he would be with Anton Yenes, and we'll come to the details later. But I'd like to just summarize quickly the involvement with SIPO Masinga. So I get called in by the COO, of course, and could have been one executive director, because there's an allegation against him on what he ought to have done as the group executive, or what he failed to do as the group executive. And of course, as a responsible labor relations person, I would want to know the substance behind the whatever it is that I'm asked to advise on. And of course, I would either be told or given the information to say, no, these are the reasons, and I would, of course, want to see evidence so that when I advise, it's in context to what is before me. So in this case, I think I'm told that there is evidence, but of course, evidence does not get given to me, and I'm therefore asked to advise on the process of the decision seems to have been made already, that on the basis of the allegations at hand, he must be suspended. So, of course, and as I already said, I would ask for evidence, and no, don't worry about the evidence. We have the evidence. Just tell us what the correct process is to do the right thing. So mostly I would get at the point where mostly I would advise, well, at least insofar as most of these transactions are concerned, about the process. And mostly, in any case, it's something that I'm passionate about, both process and substance, because they have impact on each other. And in this instance, a decision is made. He must go, just give us the template, make sure that it's the right template that gets him to go.
Now,
I'm not going to get into, sorry?
Sorry to rudely interrupt you. Who takes that decision? Who tells you that? Who communicates the decision to you?
Well, it would be, for instance, the COO, Mr. Mutsoning. And as I said, in this instance, I remember vividly, it was him and it was Anton Yenes. Anton is he's a person that used to be the executive. He used to be the group executive of commercial, who is, and I'm subject to being corrected, who's currently the advisor, the commercial advisor, and he features in almost everything at the SABC, supporting, I suppose, the executive directors. So he was there, indicating, what it is that SIPO, did or is alleged against him.
So you called in to provide advice. What is your advice?
So my advice is that, well, I don't have the full appreciation of the evidence, but if there is evidence against him that is compelling, of course there are certain things that we need to do or ask, whether he's going to interfere with the witnesses. In fact, that would be the standard question on anybody that gets suspended by the SABC, whether there is, that there's a potential of them interfering with the witnesses, how serious is the matter. There would be a number of issues that I would ask before, because naturally I'm wanting to defend the SABC's interest such that when you are taken to court, you're not found wanting. So, of course, I then indicate that, well, with whatever is in front of me, which is not a complete picture, I will assist you and I will give you a template that indicates the process because I don't know the substance. However, obviously somebody has to answer on the substance when it comes to whatever challenge that the SABC may have. But I also need to indicate that charges were drafted against him. He was eventually charged. He was suspended, charged, and right in the middle of the process, which is the correct process to charge an employee, obviously, to give them an opportunity to state their case, the process was abandoned. And how the process gets to be abandoned in this case is that I then get called in to be told that, in fact, there's more evidence that has come and it requires for us to terminate his services summarily. So then I, of course, get curious about why would we terminate an employee's contract without taking them through a disciplinary process where they need to defend themselves. And the answer was no, there's serious evidence that has come. But what is the evidence? No, there are things that he's doing on the side that may jeopardize SABC, but it's sketchy for me. So I'm like, no, I don't agree. Anyway, whether there was evidence or not, the correct process is to take an employee through a hearing where they have an opportunity to defend their case and state their case. So then the following day, I get to be called in by the COO again in the presence of the legal advisor from the Minister of Communications office, Dan Mancha. That's to say that they had gotten, meaning the COO had gotten advice from him to terminate. Then we argue about the modalities of how that would work out. And obviously, I then state the fact that I do not agree. And I indicate to him that he should know as a lawyer himself that my interest is in employment law. And therefore, that's where you give an employee an opportunity. We get told to go outside and just draft the letter to terminate. We do go outside to the boardroom of the COO, and I tell the legal advisor, of course, that me and you don't agree, so I'm not going to be able to be assisting you, but feel free to tell me what you need. I'll give it to you because I'm not going to be part of it. Indeed, I do that. So I give him the charges because that was part of the responsibility I had to ensure that charges were drafted. But because there was a lawyer that was briefed to assist us with drafting that, and that process was abandoned. SIPO took us, meaning the SABC, and pardon me for saying us, I sometimes forget that I'm no longer at the SABC, so when I say us, I mean the SABC, and I could be corrected there, I'm sorry. So, of course, the SABC then loses the case on the basis of unfairness because you can't terminate. Exactly what we said. We take the matter to appeal. When I say we, it does not necessarily mean that I had agreed that the matter should be taken on appeal because I also knew that we were going to lose the case. But the matter then goes, and of course, SABC loses the case at court for obvious reasons. I think I've already stated those. And then at some point, the SABC then decides to settle the matter with SIPO without him having gone through the entire process. And but to also just mention the feature that was interesting was also the anger that he caused around challenging the MOI, because at some point I think SIPO, the Memorandum of Incorporation at the SABC that was actually signed by the minister. And my interpretation is that probably that's exactly why the legal advisor of the Minister of Communication was maybe brought in, but I am speculating, was brought in perhaps to deal with the part of the MOI because SIPO was also challenging how he got dismissed without the board having approved his dismissal. It was after the MOI was changed, and therefore he was saying that the changing of the MOI was illegal, and I think he was seen to have overstepped his territory as an employee now to be getting over into a territory of an MOI for the minister.
Okay. Whilst SIPO is on suspension, do you know whether or not he is receiving his salary, firstly? Secondly, what was the duration of his suspension?
Sorry, I think I'm going to be incorrect if I tell you exactly the number of months, but I can tell you it would have been something about a year. SIPO had been on suspension and he was paid. And I will just also save you time to inform you that others were also suspended that I would mention unpaid, whilst they were at home. And the periods would, of course, range from 14 months to any other thing whilst they're on suspension, something that would, of course, bother me as a practitioner in employee relations, that employees get paid whilst they're at home.
Okay, enough about SIPO now. Can we move to another executive?
So, okay, let me talk about perhaps Itani. Mr. Itani Tsaisi was the group executive of risk. He was group risk at the SABC, and because of the newspaper, the article that went out about the finances of the SABC, he was a suspect, having leaked the information allegedly, and of course, the same thing was done, and I think I was caught by surprise because, I think people were talking around me, in parables, and I'm not sure why, but eventually, and I'm going to cut the long story short, I understood he was not the only one who was suspended for having allegedly leaked the information. I think there were 4 of them, but he was the only group executive, and I think therefore he then becomes the point about the executives, not that others were not important. But in this case, his case is peculiar in the sense that there was an investigation, of course, and I kept on asking about the outcome of that investigation from the COO at the time, and of course, I'm sure by now we know who the COO at that time was, and I won't go on and mention the name. So I would get the assurance that no, the investigation is going on, we just are waiting, but who's conducting the investigation? Because some of these things I have to report on, especially when the parliamentarians and the AG and whoever that cares to know asks. I am the first point of contact about suspensions and all of those. So I need to know what is going on at any given point. So it only later came to my attention, I think it would have been about 12 months down the line when, I had been brushed off about where this matter is. And I basically learned that he was cleared of the allegations. But I think there was a very peculiar discomfort about having him to come back, because he was a risk, as a group executive of risk, who has been alleged of leaking. He was a risk, so he can't come back, although he had been cleared of the charges. So then I got to learn that actually the people that were doing the investigation were the State Security Agency. Of course, I was concerned about that, but that information, of course, did not come to me as official as it was supposed to be coming. I gathered at some point through colleagues that, in fact, of course, this was hidden away from me, or it was forgotten for one reason or the other, that, in fact, the people that were doing the investigation was the State Security Agency, something that is unfamiliar to me. I don't think I've ever heard of it. until the time, and I think around the time of my leaving the SABC, which is September, I think Itani was also then leaving the SABC. But he had been on full pay throughout the plus minus 14 months himself.
Let's get to another executive.
Then, I think then I think I was starting to be an irritation. So, because I would ask the questions and disagree, and, you know, then there was that sense that when I don't agree, then, you know, the work that I'm supposed to be doing would be taken to legal instead. And I'm sure you've kind of seen the picture of the SABC, because the people that are in legal are mostly the commercial lawyers. But whatever it is that I needed to do to advise on issues that pertain to labor, then would be taken to legal. Therefore, I'm saying that I'm not going to have much contribution on Duarga, because that was handed over to legal. And then subsequently, there was an issue about, I think, Jabulani Maaso, who was my boss, Madota Shushu, Leslie, and they were to be charged. But at the point of, because I was also asking questions about Madota and not necessarily agreeing with the report, and that transaction was also taken away from me. I mean, I'd been dealing with executives throughout my life, but it was taken away to say, no, but you can't now deal with executives. Okay, which is fine. I do accept and understand. However, I think on the case of one executive, Mbulu Nefumbada, that she was the head of legal herself. So something very quick actually happened there. I understood that she was supposed, and it was the time that Jimmy Matthews was still the acting GCEO, and I was to advise on, you know, Mbulu her position has to be downgraded. Okay, but what are the reasons? No, she was never an executive in the first place in terms of DEF. DEF is the Delegation of Authority framework of the SABC. But no, Jimmy, the lady is there in terms of DEF. There's nothing wrong with the DEF. That's how she was appointed. Why would we, as the SABC, want to demote her? But in those interactions, it was very clear how uncomfortable the acting GCEO was. And I mean, we had an honest conversation to say, but why are we doing this? What is going on? What is the problem? So Jimmy actually said, well, man, do you know how it is? The person that really is getting me to get this right is the COO. Okay, so this is not your decision, and this person is supposed to be reporting to Jimmy. Yeah, so it has to happen, and it has to happen. I remember quite well that around July, then she was told, and at this point, I think because of the relationship that I've had with her as the person that is in legal, and myself as the person that actually does the labor law side of things, we normally would interact and talk about what needs to happen, how, and exchange views. So I think people were just careful around how they give me information, and therefore I was excluded up to a point where I got to know that she had been offered 6 months, I think, and was told that if you don't take it, you're going to be charged. So I asked her, what have you done? Why would you be charged? And she said, I don't know. So, because I asked her directly now, it was a matter that concerned me, not just only as the, but again, it's about protecting the interests of the SABC. Eventually, she was, I think she managed to negotiate herself out of, but she did not know why she was going to be charged. The long and short is that in any case, something strange that happened in that transaction as well is that she was told in front of her colleagues, her reportees, direct reports, on the day that you are not a group executive. And unfortunately, I was part of that, not knowing what was going to be discussed, which I found quite shocking. It's nothing that I've ever experienced in my life, that a group executive is told on the day that they are demoted. In any case, they were not supposed to be there because the DEF was incorrect. I mean, when I joined the SABC, there was a group executive of legal and appointed correctly in terms of DEF, but in her case, you know. So that was the other one.
Okay. Let's get to the reporting lines. In some of these matters, you get to be removed because the people involved are your seniors, the group executives. Now, you are reporting to the group executive, Human Resources,
Yes.
who was at a level equivalent to the group executives involved. Were these matters taken away from you, referred to be dealt with by the group executive HR together with legal, or were they simply transferred from your office to legal?
Okay, so it just depends on the day. So, for instance, sometimes I would just hear from my colleagues, my team, my direct reports that there's a matter that of an executive that I'm dealing with, which I do not know anything about. But I kind of figured immediately why either I would not be doing something, or my boss at the time, the group executive of HR, would not be involved in the in fact, he himself was kind of removed from dealing with many issues for one reason or the other. I'm sure he will talk for himself in respect of why and whatever happens. But sometimes I would, of course, not ask much because I'm the specialist and the head of employee relations. Sometimes he would, in any case, have to come to me. But that's not my call to make. So if a person then decides that today this matter is not going to be handed to you, it gets taken to whoever for whatever reason, I would not know. What I do know, though, is that one of the issues that are quite embarrassing, and I know that you haven't asked me about it, is the issue of the 7 journalists, maybe the 8th journalist, where, you know, I think that the fact that I was not in agreement with the whole transaction was also an irritation, to the extent that there was, I was told that or whatever that happens has to happen in the presence of the legal person. And I'm not sure how, where that came from. And so if I get involved in advising, you know, a person that was acting as head of legal would be imposed to say, if she advises, you must be there. And would ask the person, well, what are you doing here? What do you know about my area? Not that you don't, but what is the relevance of your being here when I had been doing this work for all this time? So I figured that probably I have become an irritation because I would ask and not agree, and I became very irrelevant.
Let's quickly go to the former Chief Audit Executive. Can you just briefly touch on the circumstances surrounding her termination of service?
Okay, so and that would be Miss Lorraine Francois. So I learned that because I was called by the 2 executives at the time, the executive directors. It was James, the CFO, and Jimmy as the acting GCO at the time. And at the time, it was when the COO was not at the SABC. And so my understanding is that she went and she made whatever representations that she made to the audit committee, the committee of the board, regarding the irregularities around the transactions that were done by the CFO. The detail of that, or the exact detail, I can't say I had, although I was called in to also advise on the best process to follow when you suspend a person, as I always do. What is the correct process? Why must it be done? How must it be done? And I mean, there's always this notion that our process is that you need to give an employee time to say why they should not be suspended. But every time I have to convince the powers that be that this process has to be done. We can't skip a process because we're going to be found wanting. It was the case with Lorraine as well. In fact, to the extent that the COO, when he came back, told me that he was told that I had leaked information in respect of Lorraine Francois's suspension. And why would I do that? I have no idea until today. However, she was suspended, I think for about 6 months, and because there was no appetite of having her back any time, and I think she had remained with a period that I think was acceptable, so to speak, to the SABC to pay her off, and therefore she was paid off, I think, the remainder of her contract, which from December to June, which is the time that the contract was. So she was not charged, she was on suspension, full paid, and she was paid the remainder of her contract, and that was it.
Okay. To be fair to the board, perhaps before we get there, in your normal processes, you indicated that you had to report to the AG, to report to Parliament. Of course, those reports would not leave from your desk or your office directly to these institutions. Can you tell us what was the process of processing these labor disputes? Did they ever get to the board? Not talking about the ones we've just discussed. I'm just asking about the process in general.
Okay, so you for instance, would have people like Itani who report to the risk committee. You would have people like Lorraine who reports directly to the audit committee. And in the normal course of things, you, for instance, should have me report to the group executive who would present these matters to the HR committee, and then the subsequent relevant committees that these people or these group executives report to. That's the normal course of things. However, I must also mention that with the change in the DEF, the Delegation of Authority framework, informed by the amendments to the MOI, it meant that in respect of the disciplinary processes, the executive directors were now in charge of the whole, for instance, you would have had to ask, if you were to charge an executive director or the group executive, you would have had to ask a committee, a chairperson of the committee or whatever committee or the board to give you approval to charge a group executive. So as a result of the change in the MOI, the impact then became seen in the DEF or translated to the DEF, such that the group executives, the directors themselves, the executive directors, are now given that power of the board for them to decide on any matter that has to do with the discipline, which is what SIPO, as I said, challenged. So in the normal course of things, that's how things would work in a nutshell.
Now, in respect of the executives we've just discussed, I'm not sure at what stage was the MOI changed. which had an impact on death. But where some of these suspensions, charges, and settlements ever brought to the attention of the board?
So, because I do not sit at the board meetings, I would not be able to say with confidence, yea or nay, about whether or not they actually served there as whether information or any other matter. I think the group executive of human resources would be in a better position to indicate whether or not in the HRM, for instance, subcommittee of the board, any of these actually served, because mine is to inform him of the operations and legalities or any other aspect around those matters, and I would give to him. Sometimes not, because sometimes the instruction would be report to me as the COO and leave the rest.
Lastly, ma'am, you left the SABC recently.
Yes.
Are you at liberty to share with the committee the circumstances or the reasons why you're no longer at the SABC?
Oh, well, yeah. So just briefly, I think it had everything to do with the integrity that I thought I still had, and perhaps I still wanted to have as I left the SABC. I think it was hurtful, to hear, whether it is the journalists, whether it's 702, radio stations, to ask about what is going on at the SABC. Where is the head? Do they even have labor relations department when these things happen? But over and above is the fact that I had been told in my face that there's no trust relationship or there's no longer confidence. In fact, I had already seen the norm, the practice, what was becoming the normal practice, that, certain matters would be either taken away from me, as I said before, given to legal, and I think, as I said before, that I was becoming an irritation, or I had become an irritation because I would not agree with certain things, and I knew that at that time I was a stumbling block. So I decided that rather than being forced out, or rather than challenging the SABC on the constructive dismissal, whatever the case is, and I would then went to the acting group executive to say, look, clearly I'm no longer wanted here. Can we talk? Let's be matured about it and talk. It fell on very fertile soil. So the rest is history.
So who told you in your face that you were no longer needed?
Well, it's basically, other than the fact that I'm sure I'm old enough to get the cues, been there for 5 years, but it was confirmed actually by the current acting group executive of HR, that, the powers that be don't give you the cases anymore because, you don't give them the kind of advice they want, or they've lost faith. I don't know, but when I got that sense, because it was said, it's not in fact that the sense, it was said that, and I could see it, that the cases get taken away from me, they get to be given to legal, and it seemed that the legal department was delivering. I don't know, but I'm just saying that it was more keen, or they were more keen to actually get their matters resolved as best as the SABC wanted them to be resolved.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions, sir.
Thank you, Advocate Van Are. Ms. Nkosi, were you given a golden handshake?
Well, depending what that is.
Were you given a severance package?
I actually asked whether they could talk to me about settlement, that separation money. I asked for that, and as I said, it fell on fertile soil.
And how long was the remainder of your contract?
So the remainder of my contract was 21 months.
And you got in excess of R1 million in terms of your settlement, yes or no?
Yes.
Over to you, Honorable Hlongwane. You've got 5 minutes starting now. I beg your pardon, it's Monday, sir. It's Monday. Honorable Mokwena, you've got 5 minutes. I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Are you well, ma'am?
I am well, thank you very much.
You, just to establish, have you been threatened by anybody, either legally or otherwise, for your presence here?
Not yet.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, I just missed one point. You said in the dismissal of SIPO, in that meeting that you had with the legal advisor, and there was an instruction from the minister? No?
No. So there was no instruction from the minister. There was just a legal advisor from the Minister of Communications office, namely Lungisani Manja.
Okay.
The instruction, I did not understand it to have come from the minister,
from the minister
herself.
itself. Okay.
No.
So, yeah, the MOI, the amendment to the MOI, which then effected the changes to the delegation of authority framework, literally gave the powers to, and I will say in particular, the COO, to run amok in the SABC. Would you agree with that?
It definitely gave the powers to the 3 executive directors to do.
Is it my understanding that most of these dismissals that you're talking about were effected by the COO?
Certainly, I would say directly and indirectly. The example I made, of course, it was not a dismissal, but it was a push out, at least in respect of the head of legal, because as I said, when I spoke to James, who was the acting group exec, not James, rather Jimmy Matthews, he indicated that it was in the interest of the COO.
Okay.
That's what he said to me. And the others where I had a direct talk to him, in fact, it was mostly driven from his office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Side question. The New Age deal, did it happen in your tenure?
HD.
The New Age deal.
New Age deal.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure when it happened. It could have been.
But certainly you saw it.
Because I started in 2011.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You saw it unfold, although you didn't know.
I was not involved with the intimate details, so it was a side thing for me that I was not particularly interested in.
No, the reason why I'm asking is because it's becoming interesting. The MOI gets amended. It gives powers to the COO, and I will say the COO because each and every case that we've heard here, it seems that it is the COO who has pushed people away. It gives the COO the power to hire and fire, right? The New Age deal happens. So it seems to me that this MOI was a tool to clear this illegal thing of the New Age. But I'm interested in another issue. In the transfer of Mr. Hlaudi from the Free State to headquarters in Johannesburg, did it happen in your tenure?
No, it didn't. When I got to the SABC, I think the COO then. Okay, let me correct me. So when I got to the SABC, Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng, was the GM stakeholder relations.
Okay, and this is the time in which he was sitting in board meetings.
I suspect so. Remember, I don't sit in board meetings,
Yes.
but yes, my understanding is that at some point he acted as group executive, stakeholder relations, where I understand he was sitting in board meetings. Yes.
Okay, just one last question, because I know the chair is going to stop me now. How much money have you just? Do you have like a round figure of how much money the SABC could have lost in these frivolous suspensions of people staying 14 months? And I will mention as well, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting trend that I've seen also in the Free State of these frivolous suspensions while deals are happening.
Honorable Mokoena, I do not have the exact figure.
Yeah.
I will tell you this though, that it is a lot of money. I will not be shy to tell you that, as I said, it worries you as the practitioner in labor relations, the exodus that is fruitless, in my view, that is happening, using your word, Chairperson, the handshakes, and people sitting at home, not working. It pains me. It used to pain me that we had to answer and say, you know, why people are sitting at home.
Yeah.
It's also against the fairness in general, because, as they say, justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very
in all
much.
levels, it has not been fair.
Ma'am. You can add to it as you answer the questions, whatever you want to say. We're not stopping you, but time is of the essence. But as you respond to other questions, you can build on what you wanted to say now. Honorable Mahlanga.
Chair, thank you, Madam. So from what you are saying, from all these people that we're talking about, you could summarize it by saying that there were no fair labor practices at the SABC.
At least in respect of the group executives, I think I could say that with confidence, because I've actually seen and experienced it. In respect of the most employees of the SABC, where there has not been any interference, where a process is a simple process of an employee having done something wrong, I can tell you that the processes mostly have been fair, at least insofar as my involvement has been concerned.
What would you say were the reasons for these people who were not treated fairly, who, for a lack of a better word, we could say they were purged from SABC? What were the reasons? What is behind all these actions, would you say?
Well, that would definitely be speculation on my part, because I don't know. What I do know, though, is that most of these people here are people who have stood their ground in respect of how taking personally the interests of the SABC and ensuring that things are done correctly. I'd like to think, I could be wrong, but my opinion is that these are the people that had been fighting to do the right things at the SABC.
And who would replace those people after they are removed? Just you know, I know it's a complex matter, but I just want if you are able to.
So look,
Okay.
the executive directors are basically making decisions about who needs to go where, how, when, how, why, and all of that. And incidentally, the people that are there are those that would have been, whether directly or indirectly, would have the COO would have been, the then COO would have been happy with. Now, my opinion.
Now, you said there was an investigation carried out by what do you call?
Security
State
agency.
security. What were they investigating?
I have no clue, but they did their work under the guise of looking at the leakage. Remember the issue of the suspended people related to the leakage of the information of the SABC's financials. So my understanding is that that's what they were looking for. I don't understand the scope of their investigation and why it was them that was investigating. I cannot tell you that, but it was strange.
And I guess you know what the mandate of the COO is at the SABC, if you don't mind, just to elaborate. What actually is the mandate of that position?
The mandate of the position, the question is a
COO.
bit broad, say, if you could, Honorable, please help me.
It includes all these other things that we have picked up, labor relations issues and...
So, of course, in the normal course of things, for instance, there would be things that are supposed to be dealt with by the group executive of HR to assist any other group executive or executive director, but mostly you find them reside within the COO, which is something that is unusual, again, because, for instance, you would have people like the legal, and I'll just talk the function. The function, in fact, let me put it this way, that the group executive of HR, who I'm sure is going to say exactly what I'm saying, is that he could not do what he's required to do, yet his function reports to the CEO naturally, you know. But for one reason or the other, nothing happens at the SABC without the blessing of Mr. Motsoeneng.
Chair,
Nothing.
thank you.
I thank you, sir. Beg your pardon, Honorable Swartz.
Thank you very much for your input. Would it then be correct to say that the State Security Agency was asked by Mr. Motsoeneng to investigate that leakage?
That was my understanding, sir.
And have you ever experienced the involvement of the State Security Agency before in any matters of the SABC? It seems startling to me that you would have the State Security Agency involved in investigating the public broadcaster.
We have an internal investigating unit at the SABC called internal audit. Well, the side of forensics. Those are the people that normally investigate our cases. And as I indicated, this for me was strange. In fact, it was not just strange at the SABC. Throughout my career, I've worked in other places as well.
From my side, I find it quite startling and shocking,
Yes.
but that's besides the point. Can I just move on to the interesting, just to substantiate your indication of the role of Mr. Motsoeneng in the suspension of members, and it seems to be pulling the strings behind the scenes. That is in line with the findings of the public protector. In fact, to quote one of her findings, Mr. Motsoeneng purged senior staff members, leading to the loss of millions of rands on unnecessary settlements for irregular terminations of contracts of employment. Would you agree with that finding?
I would want to agree, given that which I have said about the executives that I have already mentioned.
Thank you. Your role in the disciplinary action against Mr. Motsoeneng himself, were you at all involved in that process?
The process that took place about...
Recently?
Recently.
Yes.
No, I wasn't.
And why would that be, seeing as you're head of the labour and having been involved in many of the matters?
It was outsourced.
But your witnesses would obviously, the witnesses would have come from inside the SABC.
It was outsourced, so the level of my involvement, or perhaps my department's involvement, is when I shamefully sent one of my team members to go and ensure that the process, in terms of whatever it is that the person that was briefed, because they had to come back and and report on how the matter was finalized. That was the extent of the involvement of my department. Otherwise, in terms of the arrangements and other things, in fact, it was more administrative than any other thing, very menial.
I understand that, and it might well have been in terms of the court order that it had to be outsourced to ensure that there was independence. But the public protector also had an interesting finding relating to that disciplinary action, where they said, whilst the board did not initiate the disciplinary action, it only did this after the court application was instituted. The process also was malicious compliance, as key witnesses were not called and important evidence was not produced. Would you be able to comment on that? But probably not, because you weren't involved in the process itself.
I'd be very reluctant to comment precisely because of your last point, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all from my side. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, sir. Honourable Koza.
Don't see it. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kosi. Ma'am, I would imagine that your primary responsibility was to maintain labor peace in your organization. And obviously, you were also responsible for driving the strategy and respect of that area. Is that correct?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay. From 2011 to 2016, what were the key cost drivers or risk factors that you identified in your area of responsibility at SABC?
Wow. So I think one of the things that I really wanted to deal with, and this is exactly why I had indicated the interest I had about where the investigation is at, if there is an investigation, to actually minimize the costs of having employees on suspension, because clearly it is fruitless and wasteful expenditure, to the extent that, of course, as the head of employee relations, I had to try to put stringent rules, if you like, or clauses within the disciplinary code that discourage the whole notion of suspension or suspending people willy-nilly. It's one of the things that I actually wanted to deal with. And unfortunately, whilst the policy may have said good things that needed to happen so that we meet the strategy of reducing costs, it wouldn't happen all the time, because the decisions would be taken above my head, as I have already indicated that when a decision to suspend an executive is done, it's a decision, it's done. The next thing that needs to be done, at least insofar as I'm concerned or I am called, is to say, ensure that the process is correct. So actually part of the issues that had actually made me want to go, because there were things that I was not meeting in respect of good governance, because I think the whole issue of suspension and how it costs the SABC borders on that. So the cost was one of the areas that I had to look at for the SABC.
Can you help the committee to understand how much cost was involved in the litigation or settlement of contracts during the period when you were at SABC? I think that's very important. You must remember, one of the primary responsibility of this committee is to establish the financial sustainability of SABC and financial prudence, fiscal prudence as SABC. And I'm drawing your attention to the fact that during 2013 and 14, SABC accounted for 3.4 billion, not million, of irregular expenditure. And maybe I want you to come to zoom into that, ma'am, if you don't mind.
Okay. I'm sorry that I did not prepare anything that was financial.
Okay.
But I think, as I indicated to the Honorable Mukwena, because I think he also asked me the question, It's lots of money, ma'am, and I don't know how to quantify that, other than indicating that it is concerning to have people that are on suspension, sometimes, as you said, frivolously, for things that they're not even supposed to be on suspension, things that could be avoided. To the extent that I know that at some point, which is one of the things that as a practitioner, again, would concern me, that people are going to be scared of making decisions because they are going to, when they make a mistake, depending on who they are, they get punished for making an operational mistake, as I said, depending on who they are. So they would be placed on suspension instead of calling them in to say, what happened here? You know, why did you do this? How can we change this? And I mean, those are basic principles of leadership, in my view, which could deal with the cost issue that you're talking about. But again, with the effective management of the day-to-day operations of the SABC. So, in a nutshell, lots of money. I can't, because it has to be accounted on a yearly basis now. To go back 5 years and say, you know, in 2012 it was this much or that much, I can tell you now, though, it is lots of money.
It's lots. No,
Honorable
thank you. I
Olive.
just wanted to get that indication. Thank you.
Honorable Olive.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to check with you, what made you to be at peace with your constructive dismissal? Because you did not challenge it. Oh, sorry. My mic was off. What made you to be at peace with your constructive dismissal? Because I hear you did not challenge it.
Well, I think it's, you know, when you have those intrapersonal conflicts and you say, well, is it worth me going through this? I have a bit of a cushion to find another job rather than being, you know, paying legal costs and, you know, being at the CCMA, having my name dragged, this, that, or the other. I decided that I knew at that particular time that my contract was not going to be renewed once it ended. Why not end it now if I can? Because it seemed to have been the norm, by the way, that I was basically following, that the executives or the whoever that is not wanted, they get paid out. Again, shamefully that I sit here and say that. I thought for me to have my integrity still, to be employable, and to just have a peace of mind, let me just take what is due to me in respect of what remains in my contract and just make a peaceful, I am leaving, it's done.
Thanks. In your 5 years with the institution, were there moments where you were allowed to follow policy or you were always adhering to the compelling word must?
Ma'am, actually that's what kept me going, because there was never a day that was the same at the SABC. There were moments, you know, when I would be excited thinking that I'm going to contribute here. This is why I'm here. This is to change things, and of course it wouldn't happen. But I must say there have been moments where policies were adhered to the T. As I said, it kind of vanishes with the higher you go, the colder it becomes. So you know, the notion of it has been decided above my head, how that, you know, and it depends on who you are. So some of them are not as important. Those that are not as important, they would be done to the T, and it would be such a, you know, a fulfilling moment for me, because there's no interference. There, you know, it's done in good faith and in the interest of the SABC. So there have been those moments that I had been happy at the SABC.
From the responses you have given to the previously asked questions, what picture can you draw in as far as labor stability is concerned at SABC?
Labor stability. Wow, that's a good one. Yeah. It's a fairly good picture in my view. because when you talk, it's in two folds. Remember, you have your bargaining unit within the SABC who are normally quite happy if they are recognized for what they do and the monies go into their bank account. And indeed, one of the good things I must say that Mr. Mutweneng has done was to ensure that the bargaining unit is kept happy. I will mention that. So when it comes to issues of collective bargaining and ensuring that people are well paid, that part, in that sense, has been taken care of. However, there have been instances where unions are not happy because they are asking about these executive either bonuses or dismissals or appointments that seemed to be irregular, or so those things would play a role in terms of the instability within labor, because they, especially when the annual reports are out, to say we need you to account and tell us, you know, why this is happening and why this is not happening. So that's just the extent of the instability when people want to know about, you know, things that they have a particular interest in. Otherwise, generally, people are happy because bad things, for a lack of a better word, would happen with the executives.
Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Nkosi, I just want to talk a little bit more about the State Security Agency, because like Honourable Swart, I'm quite shocked that the State Security Agency was involved in employee relations at the SABC. Now, we know that the matter with Mr. CSC was not the first time the SSA was involved. We received information that in August 2015, the State Security Agency asked staff in the Durban offices to vacate their offices. They spent 2 or 3 hours during, you know, we don't know what they were doing, but then they threatened staff should they speak about what they were doing in those offices. Did you ever, as a manager of labor relations, receive information of similar operations by the State Security Agency at other SABC offices?
I think except the incident you're mentioning in Durban, which I did not know anything about, of course, until it happened. And of course, I took interest because employees were jittery about it. And I was asking around about what was going on, whether it was true or not. And, you know, I was given the answer about, yes, they had been given access by the security leg of the SABC to go in, and it was kind of, you know, played down. And this incident that I had mentioned that I did not know where, you know, Mr. Itani Tseisi was concerned. Those were the only incidents I had known at the SABC where State Security Agency was involved. Other than us perhaps asking policy matters that, for instance, relate to vetting, if you want to make a policy decision about whoever that is fit to hold office, for instance, in procurement, or you know, all those policy issues where you just ask those questions for guidance. But the investigation and the involvement in the manner that it was said they were, it was my first time. I've never heard of it before.
Would you say there was a general fear among staff, executives and journalists? Was there fear that their phones were tapped? Did they feel like they were constantly under surveillance by the State Security Agency? Did you ever receive reports of
yes. I mean, it was particularly in the past year, you know, this year. People, there's a atmosphere of paranoia. Mm-hmm. And even when colleagues are talking, they're scared. You know, they look around to find out, or even, you know, there's paranoia about who's listening into their conversations, because people think that they are tapped. And if you ask them, it's the people that are scared to be tapped by, for instance, either the State Security Agency acting for Mr. Mutweneng, for instance. And I'm just telling it as it is, because that's the feeling that I've actually gathered about where the paranoia comes from.
All right. Were you at any point ever requested to give legal advice about the appointment of Mr. Motsoneng as permanently a COO? Were you ever approached and asked to give an opinion about that?
Never, ma'am.
All right. Would you say that if I were to, from listening to what you're saying and also reading the information that I have in front of me, that Mr. Motsoneng willfully ignored legal advice, purged staff that disagreed with him, and escalated the SABC's legal costs? Because looking at the annual reports, the SABC's legal costs from the 2014-15 to 2015-16 financial year doubled in millions. It went from 171 million to 257 million. Would you say that because Mr. Motsoneng ignored legal advice, purged staff, the SABC incurred millions in legal expenses?
I can confirm, ma'am, that there definitely would have been legal costs that would have been avoided at the SABC if only we took legal advice as it came. And as I indicated, there had been instances where my function as the head of employee relations, I would, based on the knowledge I have of labor law and people that do well in labor law, that we would brief, which either were ignored, even from my own unit, without necessarily going externally, and we would go external to get legal advice, or we would incur costs because we either would lose a case and would still pay for those services. But it was not, my understanding is that it was not only confined to my area, but it's a spread within the SABC where legal advice had been sought, ignored, and we had lost cases in general. But I'm happy to talk about my own area. I'm not oblivious to the fact that there would have been others that had been lost as a result of legal opinion not accepted or taken by the SABC.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chauke?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to have only two. The rest of my time I'll donate it to Honorable Loliwe. The point I want to come in with is that SABC is a national key point. And therefore, the issue of the state security becomes very critical, especially on the issue of vetting of executive, those people who are there. It's unfortunate, Chair, that we started vice versa. The state security, in fact, is supposed to be telling us who are these people. If you have not vetted them at a national key point, what does it tell you? Therefore, the question I'm going to ask you is that this executive, in your knowledge, why they were not vetted? The second question is that the people who dealt with who were outsourced to deal with the DC of Mr. Motsoneng, who was that company? Maybe you can share with us the people that dealt with who were outsourced to deal with the DC. So the rest of the remaining questions I can give them to Honorable Loliwe to continue.
Okay, all right. I think the SABC was actually grappling to vet the executives that had already been there. Right, I'm going to venture into that, although it's not necessarily my area, but because the executives had already been there and this was not part of their conditions of employment or not contained in their contract. So that's why I indicated that where state security agency would have been contacted, in my view, was about policy, vetting of the executives, and that's the acceptable, in my view, point of contact for the SAA, which the SABC was grappling with, because they wanted to find out how they could incorporate that into the policy such that the executives are vetted. I don't know why the executives were not vetted, but there certainly was a good case to argue about the involvement of the SAA in that particular sense, if it answers the question. The second one, I thought I got it. Now it just escaped me. Honorable Chauke, sorry.
Outsourcing?
The outsourcing,
outsource,
sorry.
the outsource.
Thank you. My understanding is that the outsourcing went to werksmans. So the lawyers that had been appointed, and I'm sure you had read the newspapers, initially were werksmans that were given the job, and my understanding is that it was the Minister of Communications that handled that particular transaction of appointing whomever it was that was going to be representing, whether it was the SABC, whether it was the Minister and the board, to represent the SABC or whoever at that particular point. My understanding is that werksmans withdrew from that particular transaction and somebody else then since came in. The nitty-gritties of what had happened leading werksmans to withdraw from that matter, say, I have no information whatsoever, and therefore my information in that regard is very limited.
My very last one, therefore, Chair, on the issue of vetting, that, and it's a comment, Chair, it's not going to be a direct question, that the state security gets involved in issues of human resource than to deal with the serious issues of security of the country, by the way, because SABC is about the country. It's a worrying factor, Chair, and it needs to be noted. It needs to be noted at some point, the Minister of State Security will have to explain this thing, Chair. Because anyone can stand there in the SABC now as we speak and say, I'm declaring a coup in the country, I'm taking over as the president of the country. Because of the kind of people that we have there that are not known. And that's the issue that I thought, let us note it, Chair, that as we move forward, this is a point that it must be noted, and we need to find a way in between now and the end of this commission as to how we deal with that part.
Shall be noted, Mr. Chauke. Honourable Killian.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I absolutely concur with Honourable Chauke. The Group Executive for Risk actually brought it to our attention that by law, all of those people at the top should be vetted and should have security clearance. And that was not done. So I think it is an important matter that we must register. But just to come back to the issue, the Public Protector was in fact investigating a purge or an alleged purge, and she felt that it was substantiated through her investigation. We now faced, would you describe the most recent, the new, 9 months, the last of your tenure at the SABC, where you saw things happening and going the wrong way? Would you describe that as a second wave of a purge that took place with very senior people being charged and called to disciplinaries, but actually with a foregone conclusion that they should leave? Would you please comment on that?
Well, Honourable, I think I had indicated that certainly there would be sometimes some sort of basis to correct behavior at certain levels. I had indicated that I would have recommended differently in terms of how the SABC would have dealt with some of the issues that the SABC was grappling with. However, with some of the transactions, in fact, with these that had been mentioned, it had been clear to me that these employees, these executives, were mostly the executives that would not be given a second chance for one reason or the other if they had erred to be at the SABC, and therefore the decision would have been taken that because you are not towing the line, whatever that is, therefore you are not going to be part, or you don't form the part of the vision of the SABC, again, whatever that is. And so, as I indicated, I also could see that I was also not in that vision myself, hence my volunteering. And therefore I'm saying that directly or indirectly, these people, most of them in fact, I'm sure other organizations would be happy to have the caliber of the people that the SABC, and I'm not saying this because I am one of those, but just looking at the executives that are there, in my view, these are mostly capable people that you could find. And this is relative to where I have been. I've worked for National Treasury, I've worked for Transnet, I've worked for a union, I've been around in order for me to be able to make the comparison. So relatively speaking, if anybody employs these people, these are engineers, these are accountants, these are legal, these are people that have studied and have been working, in my view, very hard and honestly for the SABC. Therefore, yes, I would say that.
Were anybody ever charged for transgressions of the PFMA, specifically section 51(1)(b), where effective steps need to be taken against those who are guilty of irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, etc.? Were anybody in your term and tenure at the SABC ever charged for those transgressions by law?
I cannot remember that there could have been charges with one or two GMs or managers at the SABC charged with fruitless, wasteful and fruitless expenditure at the SABC. There certainly were those. But if your question is that it's at the top, at the executive level or executive directors or whatever the case is, no. What did not arrive, it went and it didn't come back with employees, therefore that was the fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Yes, there have been people that had been charged for that. But in respect of the people higher up, I have to really dig my mind to find any who were charged for wasteful and...
How would you describe the relationship?
Unfortunately, ma'am, that is our time up. Thank you, Ms. Nkosi, for coming through. Thank you very much. And also for understanding when we made you sit whilst we were doing our own internal business. As we say to everybody else, but before I even do that, is there anybody from the SABC who wants to cross-examine the evidence that we've just heard? Nobody. Thank you very much. Ms. Nkosi, thank you so much. As we've said to everybody else, our process ends on the 28th or thereabouts of February. So as you go home or wherever you are and you remember something that you think will assist in strengthening our report, please feel free to talk to us. This is not the end of the road, but if there is something, then you can bring it to the attention of the committee and we will share it with our members as and when we get it. Other than that, have yourself a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Next witness is available. We will have 3 minutes. May we start, honourable members? Can we ask members to take their seats? Honourable members, we are going to proceed, and if somebody could close the door at the back there. And we are going to proceed, and the next witness is Mr. Maaso, who is a former Group Executive Human Resources. Mr. Maaso, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any documents that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry. Notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a house or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside of Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. So I've been informed that you have indicated that you will take the oath, so I'd like you to repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Will be the truth.
Will be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Please say, so help me God. Raise your hand.
Please help me God.
All right. I wanted to pre-warn you, as is normally the procedure, but you didn't allow me. We're going to start with Honorable Loliwe, and then go through to Koza, go through to Van Dam. From Van Dam, we'll go to Mokoena. From Van Dam, Mokoena, Matlangu, Swartz. After Swartz, it will be Killian, and Mr. Chauke will be the final one. So prepare yourselves accordingly. Advocate Vanara, it is now just past 11:30. Could you be done with your business by 11:15?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Maaso, can you, for the record, state your full particulars?
I am Jabulani Maaso. I am the former Group Executive of Human Resources at the SABC.
When did you start at the SABC? Secondly, when did you become the Group Executive HR? Thirdly, when did you leave the SABC?
I started with the SABC in June 2013 as a Group Executive Human Resources, having gone through a process of recruitment by the board at the time, and terminated my relationship with the SABC in June 2016. This year.
Will it be correct that you served in EXCO in your capacity as Group Executive HR.
True, I did serve in EXCO as a group executive HR.
At the time you left, you were still a member of EXCO.
At the time I left, I was still the member of EXCO, yes.
You reported directly to whom?
In terms of the organizational structure, I report directly to the Group Chief Executive Officer.
And in your tenure, that would have been Ms. Mahobo, is that correct?
In my tenure, it would be Ms. Mahobo, Mr. Tian Olifir, Mr. Anthony Yenes, briefly, and then Mr. Jimmy Matthews.
Will it be correct to suggest that one of your responsibilities was to assist the group CEO realize the strategies of the institution, particularly around HR-related matters?
That would be true as articulated in the job description. It was to basically develop a human resource strategy and plan, and to support the business strategy and ensure that the talent management aspects of the organization are taken care of, as well as all other value chain processes such as employee relations, organizational development, learning and development, as well as the HR operations.
I'm sure you're better placed to know that is quite a big field to cover in less than 30 minutes. I want, though, to zoom to 4 areas of that strategy: the recruitment, policies, the performance management systems, the vetting of employees, and the recognition award. I think we would confine our interaction on those 4 topics. Can you then outline us what your recruitment policies that would have supported your HR strategy spoke about?
I think just to introduce the issue is that I'm just setting the scene here to say when I came in, I found that, which has of course also had been found already by the audits from the Auditor General, that the policies were archaic at the point of me coming in. For instance, the recruitment process, the performance management system was not there. The recognition and reward policies were not in place. And so when I came in, I made it part of my deliverables to ensure that we develop policies, recruitment. For instance, the recruitment process, that being a national key point, for instance, let's start there, is that it required that we should indicate that people should be vetted, but the policy that was applicable did not have that. Secondly, it didn't have anything to do with competency assessment. And I found that it was unacceptable because competency assessments were done only as and when it suits an individual that does them. So it then became a selective practice. So depending on what an individual wanted to do, whether to exclude an individual, they would put them into a competency assessment, but it wasn't provided for by the policy. And so on. And also we needed to ensure that we separate between the employees of the organization and the freelancers in the organization, how they get recruited, so that there's no confusion, because once there's that confusion, therefore, other people take advantage of the situation and then just pick up a person, make them a freelance, and then in 2 months' time, they make them permanent. So it becomes an open door for that. And so we basically ensure that we develop those policies. The one thing that is certain about the recruitment policy of the organization is that it didn't provide. And I just want to come to the recent happenings, recent events around the issues of GE corporate affairs as it stands now with Mr. Mtsweneng. Is that there's a notion also which was articulated also just recently by the minister to say a position was set aside. The setting aside of positions that is not provided for in the policy. There's no policy that says you set aside a position. That position of group executive corporate affairs was occupied by an individual who went through a recruitment process when Mr. Mtsweneng was made a COO. Now, when he gets a position of a COO, he moves away from that position, and someone else occupied it through a formal process. And therefore, there's no claim that when he doesn't have a job, therefore this position is his, because then you are making an assumption that we reserve, there's a policy that says you reserve jobs for individuals. As it would happen in universities where you speak about ad hominem positions, when you want to make a person a professor and then you say this position, when you leave, there will not be any other professor position. So there isn't any policy that says you reserve positions. And so I wanted to clarify that so that because this has been playing a lot in the media, and it sends a wrong signal to say people then get ad hominem positions that are meant for them in particular. So just to put that aside. But what we did was to develop a policy, a new policy, which then is more transformative, which is legislative compliant, and look at how it could assist the organization to speed up also the process of recruitment without it becoming an impediment, as it were, but also have checks and balances in it, that there's no abuse of power. And that recruitment policy, I've sent it several times to EXCO, many a times. It went back and forth. And at the time of my departure, it had not been approved by EXCO for whatever reason. Because most of the time, when I asked to call for a policy review meeting, when an EXCO deals with a particular item, meaning this time we need to deal with policies today to approve them so that we speed up the process. Because there were lots of audit findings relating to this recruitment policy. So we need to review it. They were either cancelled or postponed at a whim, and there was nothing much I could do. And so at the time of my departure, that particular policy had not been approved.
In your position, I just want you to just clarify the committee. You would have had interactions with the board subcommittee on HR-related matters. Now, clearly you were experiencing some challenges at EXCO, with EXCO dealing with this all-important policy. Was it ever tabled at the board subcommittee for consideration?
Well, firstly, it had to go through EXCO first in terms of protocols and be approved there before it even goes to the Human Resource Committee. However, I had side discussions with some of the members of them, for instance, Mr. Maaso and Mr. Krishnaidu, about those particular frustrations, over these particular matters. So I'm not sure to what extent they had said they will try and influence decisions to say these things must get expedited, because it wasn't in our interest to keep on having audit findings around the issue of policies when they are there. They just, all that they needed to do was to be approved.
Now, you've already mentioned the effect of the archaic state of your previous policies, which necessitated the development of the new policy. On the audit findings, surely at EXCO you deal with strategic matters. This impacted on your strategy when you wanted to table it at EXCO, what was the reason for the lack of appetite to deal with this important policy document?
I'm not sure. I mean, as I say, some of the things that I'm going to say would be my opinions, and some of them would be observations. You know, I'm not sure what would have been the motive behind delaying. But one thing I can say is that some of those policies that were even approved, in any case, by the board, they were not implemented. Depending on what they serve for certain individuals.
Okay, can you then proceed? I interrupted you. I'm sorry for that.
No, I think I'm done insofar as the recruitment policy is concerned. I'm done.
Vetting, was there any policy that was developed? And if so, to what extent had those developments yielded any results?
As I say, vetting was not in the applicable recruitment policy before my departure, but I put it in the policy that was supposed to have been approved, simply because it was important. The group executive of risk and governance had indicated that in terms of the national key point, it was supposed to vet individuals, more especially at the top, senior executives and senior people were supposed to be vetted, and I put that in the recruitment process. But over and above that, I went out and sought for legal opinion, and as Ms. Nkosi indicated, I sought legal opinion around this issue as to saying, now that we have people who exist in positions, how do we deal with this particular matter in case there is a negative outcome? And advice. But when this matter came to EXCO around the issue of vetting, Mr. Mutweneng said the board itself is not vetted. It must be vetted first before. And so there's nothing much one can do if such statements are being uttered. But one thing is for certain is that I made all efforts to ensure that at least at the executive and senior management level we are vetted. We even went out of our way to ensure that we assess which positions, even in operations, are posing a risk to the organization. For instance, people working in technology, you know, what is the extent of sabotage that can happen? So those are the people that would need to at least vet, would engage with the unions thereafter, but at least at executive and senior, at least we should do that then whilst we're engaging labor for the other people below.
What was your performance management system?
Well, the performance management system, interestingly, is that I introduced the policy. The policy was approved by the board. It was approved in somewhere in 2014. I must say that even at the time of my departure, the implementation had been halted at that particular point. We had put a technology, an online system already. We had put in all systems in place to ensure that the performance management system can be implemented. Simply because, firstly, Parliament had asked that we should ensure that we implement performance management. The minister had asked us to do that same. The board has approved it. So there was no sense in why we're delaying it in terms of... And I even said, to ensure that we do it at least in phases, we can get the executives to contract and senior management to contract, and then we sort of try and cascade it down. But it was either at staff meetings, it's going to happen, and when you try to implement it, you get stopped, but we had socialized everyone around the performance management system in the organization, but it never saw the light of day, the implementation. So, yeah, and at the point at which I left, there was no performance management system implementation when we had everything ready to take it through.
Who refused the implementation of this management system, and what were the basis?
You will
for
recall,
such refusal?
excuse me. You'll recall that Ms. Nkosi indicated that everything had to pass through the COO, the former COO, depending on whether he wants it or not. It will not see light of day at that particular point. And one of the reasons he gave was that people don't have job descriptions. And it's surprising that we develop job descriptions for executive and even executive directors, and he's supposed to sign his, but he didn't sign. He refused to sign. Now, what happens is that if he doesn't sign, the subordinates say, "Well, I work on the job description of my boss, but if he doesn't sign, why do I need to sign?" So all of these things impacted a lot around that. But since also this inquiry is about the board itself, I personally question why the board never took any action around the delay on the performance and the implementation of the performance management system. And clearly, I mean, with due respect, I feel that they neglected their duty, given the fact that they approved this policy 2014. So they're supposed to, by 2016, they're supposed to be cracking a whip around who is holding this thing and what is the situation. The one thing that happened is that, and that's why the delay of this job description. At a particular point when Mr. Matlala, Franz Matlala, was employed, I think a week or a month thereafter, he was taken to China to go with the minister and the chairperson, Professor Magube. I was approached by the deputy chairperson, Miss Leah Kumalo, who gave me a one-page document and said, the chairperson said, you must put this job description. This is a job description of a COO. I must put it into our template. The one thing that I raised with her was that, firstly, it is contractually improper. The COO reports to the CEO. So the CEO must be here. He's the one that must discuss this issue. In terms of also protocols, it's unacceptable that I'm supposed to be taking orders from a chairperson. I take orders from a CEO. So if you want to speak, I think you should speak to the CEO. Who must then? Now, when I looked at that job description, some of the areas that were there were the areas that are for the CEO that I was supposed to put into what's name. And why was it done when he leaves? When the COO is not there and then it's done. And I said, we should wait for that. It's an unfair labor practice because we're taking away some of his responsibilities and we're giving it to someone else. The third part was that the COO, according to that job description, was supposed to report to the board, to the board chairperson, and administratively to the CEO. And I found that very odd. And I said, well, firstly, there needs to be a resolution, a board resolution that says the structure has been changed, because the structure that I have in front of me says the COO reports to the CEO. And so that's how this job description then gets delayed. But one thing that was said, of me was that I was called into the office of the COO at a particular time and told that he told Professor Magube that as a chairperson that I, as a junior staff, must not be involved in these particular matters. Now, we are talking, that is, for me, that's really hurting. In terms of integrity and professional standing, that I, as a group executive, are called a junior staff. Now, I'm supposed to be assisting the board. That's my duty. And whatever I gave to Ms. Leah Kumalo was to assist her to be able to do her job properly. So she can report back to the chairperson to say these are the particular problems that we need to face. And so that delayed the job description and therefore impacted on the performance management system.
We were going to come back to specific instances, but I'm interested in general what your policies provided in respect of the recognition awards.
Well, we had again a recognition award a policy and program that was approved by the board, and we put everything in place and put even a system, an online system, to ensure that it works, and it never saw light of day. Just to put it, at the point of me leaving, there was no intention that it will ever be implemented, because there was another policy, another program on the side that was run by Mr. Mtsoneng of awarding recognition to employees. There was a...
Yeah, that's where I want us to get to.
Yeah.
If you say the recognition award policy wasn't approved, there has been allegations that there were monies paid or rewards paid to employees.
Yeah.
The 10,000. What, in terms of which policy were those payments made, and who had approved those payments?
Yeah, in terms of the recognition award program was approved by the board initially. And then I'm saying the implementation did not happen in terms of its policy. But I'm not sure when the 10,000s were paid. It could be that when I left, or is it recent? If it is the previous ones, I would know about them because those were relating to... So I'm not sure which ones you're relating, so that if you could clarify me, are they the recent ones? Or...
Okay.
Historical ones.
I was referring to the recent ones, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Let's not waste our time there. Mr. Mtsoneng was an acting COO. We now know there was a meeting at night one evening that discussed and recommended his appointment. We know there were no processes followed. You, the GEHR, amongst your responsibilities, you advise the board on HR-related matters. And we now know you were not called to that meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Being the HR executive, was the appointment of Mr. Mtsoneng as the permanent COO consistent with the policies of the SABC?
No, it wasn't consistent with the policies of the SABC. And as I indicate, I mean, some of the times it happens at the behest of a line manager that they're now making a person a permanent person, and that was the reason why the recruitment policy was being reviewed, and very seriously so. And so in this case, there wasn't any policy followed.
There are allegations, and I'm asking you that question now because at the time we probably get somebody to testify around that, you would have been gone. And this issue should ordinarily, in the chain of events, affect your area.
Yeah.
The alleged bonuses that were paid to Mr. Mtsoneng of whether it's 11.4 or 33 million, were you aware, were you involved in the processing thereof?
No, certainly it happened after my departure.
Whilst you were there were a number of executives that had left. How were those executives replaced?
Some of them was, firstly, there was acting in a position, a person acts, and then one of them was later then given the position on a permanent basis, which is Group Executive Technology. I know he acted first, and then the individual was given a position after. In other instances, for instance, the Group Executive of Risk, because this was a personal issue, as I'm sure Ms. Nkosi has shown, that it was personal between the Group Executive Risk and Mr. Mtsone. That job was dismantled. And as we speak now, I think it reports to the company secretary. Very strange, yeah, but it reports to the company secretary as a responsibility, not a position. And therefore it fell away. And some of them, mine, when I left, it was acting again. The person apparently has been confirmed now.
There is an acting person. Is there any recruitment process that gets to unfold before, even if the person was acting, before that person gets to be confirmed?
There certainly has to be. In terms of the acting policy, it must happen that way. It must then be put through to the recruitment process after a person has acted.
In these instances that you've identified, were such policies followed?
No, it wasn't. The positions were never advertised for other people maybe to have an opportunity to compete.
Now you, an group executive HR, you sit at EXCO, these things are happening. Do you ask questions at EXCO why these things are happening in a manner that is inconsistent with the policy?
Well, you would ask when you meet in terms of advice, because you were not called at any particular point of time to even deal with the matter, as it were. So you would just generally raise inconsistent application of policy. This I raised also in the Human Resource Committee all the time around the inconsistent application of policies in general.
Now, you, as Group Executive HR, reported to the Group CEO. You would, and the COO also reported to the Group CEO. Why would you be referred to as a junior staff?
I'm not sure, I suppose it's the issues as they stand now. I mean, every time they stand like that. At the SABC, it's just merely organizational organogram that sits there, but we all know where the power lies. I mean, it lies on the 27th floor. There's a 28th floor where there's a CEO, but the meetings are held in the 27th floor, where the CEO gets called in. And as you might have heard also that Jimmy Matthews was a CEO, acting CEO, but he would say exactly what Ms. Nkosi was saying, to say, we are all adults. In a way to say, we know, all of us, where the orders are coming from. So I'm just merely, or even to say, it is funny that the CEO can say, I'm still waiting for the COO to hear what he says. Because so far as I'm concerned, he could have taken a decision on certain matters as a leader, but can't.
So do I hear you correctly to say, at the time you were at the SABC, Mr. Mtsoneng behaved as a de facto Group Chief Executive Officer?
Oh, certainly.
What was the relationship between Ms. Makgobo, who was then Group Executive, and Mr. Mtsoneng, who was acting COO?
Look, in my short span, because when I came in, Ms. Makgobo left. But in my short period that I had, I can only relate to my own experience when I was in a meeting with her. You know that when you are in a meeting, then he chats in. He comes into a meeting. I'm sitting with the CEO, and then he comes in and opens the door, and he can interrupt that meeting and say whatever he says, and then the meeting can either stall or wait for him to finish what he's saying, or even he sits in that meeting if he wants to. So that has been the natural process.
One assumes that amongst the reports that would have gone through EXCO by yourself, gone to the board, included the resolution of dispute cases. Cases that went on CCMA, cases that were being investigated that affected particularly senior executives. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Ms. Nkosi took the committee through some of the cases that she worked on that impacted on the group executives. And she indicated that she reported those matters to yourself as her manager. Were those reports, the reports of those cases, tabled at EXCO and subsequently at board meetings?
They were reported as part of a statistics, not to delve into issues, but they were part of a statistics to say there's this particular matter that we're dealing with. For instance, Masinga's matter, this is how it's been dealt with. Following the others were not part of a group EXCO or board reports. Only Masinga's at the time of my tenure at the place is that it was only Masinga's. The rest of the others I had not reported on them.
Okay. One assumes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that whether it's statistics of these cases, they've gone through EXCO, they get to be tabled at board.
Yep.
And you would then, because you've prepared these reports, you must go and interact with the board on these statistics.
Yeah.
What was the appetite of board members in respect of these statistics? And were you asked the details around these cases? What caused them to be handled in the manner in which they would have been handled?
I think most of these cases came there for information purposes. And when EXCO the board members ask, I remember Mr. Mavuso asked about the fact that they have been left in the dark about Mr. Masinga's case. Where is this case and why is it going through? And it was an issue of saying, we'll tell you when it is basically reached a particular point, then we would be able to report back to the board. And it was left at that. And so it depends on whether the board members themselves showed interest in pursuing these particular matters or not, to ensure that they are kept abreast about the matters themselves, or even to question why these matters were on the table. I mean, we all, as Ms. Nkosi indicates, that we regret the review of the MOI up to this day, all of us.
The executive directors,
Yes.
the COOs, CEO, and the CFO, two of them are acting in that space currently. Have they been vetted?
No, they haven't been vetted.
You had already left when Mr. Mutsueneng was re-employed as Group Executive Corporate Affairs. Is that correct?
Correct.
There was one question, but it escapes my mind. I wouldn't detain the committee, though. That was my last question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Mr. Maaso, Is there a retirement age policy at the SABC?
There certainly is a retirement.
What age is that retirement age?
It's basically technically at 65.
Technically at 65, meaning?
Well, because there is also a pension. There was also a pension requirement also around 63, and which we then tried to change. But then we said we'll follow what the government utilizes as a retirement age, which was 65.
I'm thinking about this because I want to be forgiven in anticipation that my question might not be politically correct. Ms. Teresa Geldenhuys, had she reached the retirement age?
Yeah, I think at the time of my stay there, she had reached retirement age. In fact, just to illustrate your point, maybe it will be her. Anton Hienes also had taken an early retirement, but on the basis of health, that he was very sick. But he's as healthy as anyone working as an advisor in the office of the COO. The current person working in employee relations had just recently taken, who worked under Ms. Nkosi, had also gone on retirement, but was recalled by Mr. Mtsweneng. Now he's the one that deals with all now ER issues that or all the charges. There's a Mr. Lynn Mansfield, who also was recalled from retirement because there was they differed with Mr. Masinga around the issue of encryption and non-encryption, because Mr. Masinga had been implementing what the strategy that was approved by a board at a particular point. So Mr. Mansfield is there to now work. He's back now from retirement. He works also on the DTT. So essentially, I'm trying to give that this has been a
just one more question. Of these that you've mentioned, were the board appraised and were the board aware that there were members that was employed by SABC that, technically speaking, shouldn't be there according to the policy?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because maybe it's the executive directors that would have reported, because I didn't have anything to do with them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can we start with you, Ma'am Lule?
Thanks, Chair. Let me take the tune from where the Chair has left. Why did the institution decide to recall retired people? Were they possessing scarce skill or what?
To start with, I mean, if you look at Mr. Anthony Yenes, I'm not sure what rare skill, because there is a commercial person. There was already a group executive of commercial, Ms. Nomsa Piliso, who was appointed after he left. And there's also capable people there to do the work. I'm not sure about Mr. Mansfield, because there were other people who could handle issues of DTT within the organization. So it always leaned on the fact that you are supporting my vision. So I suppose around my vision.
Am I correct to assume that every time you say COO, you mean Mr. Mtsweneng?
Definitely.
One other thing, what support have you provided to the members who have been suspended every now and again at SABC?
Most of them would be suspended, as Ms. Nkosi has indicated, without. I've never been called into any. The one that I was called at was Mr. Masinga's when it was about to be started, and I had a different view again on there, and I told them that I've got a different view and I don't agree with the way we're going to start with this particular process, and I was left out. Then I was left out in all of the others. So essentially, there was no other support that I could provide to either the board or the executive directors on the matters.
In executing your duties, were you following policy or adhering to a directive from certain individuals? And if it's the latter, Can you expatiate?
Well, I've always endeavored to ensure that we follow policy. But where directive is also in line with policy, I would basically assist. But where it is out of line with policy, then I would have a different view. As I indicated, I would always say I have a different view. And essentially in the SABC, you will see that most of the people that come here to give evidence, all of them are people who reported under the CEO. In terms of the structure, if you look at them, you will see that most of them are the ones under the CEO. So there has been two organizations of some sort, for the lack of a better word, those that reported to the CEO, those that reported to the COO. And so there has always been the fact that we would raise issues of governance in most of the time, and then you become an enemy. Secondly, is that also, if you were not employed as a result of the process of the COO, you were not supported, basically.
There's an organogram for any institution, and you are mentioning the process of the COO. How does that process of the COO impact on the organogram of the institution, and also indicate, even if you are not mentioning figures, the cost implications thereof?
It impacts because, firstly, what it does is that there was, when I came in, there were executives that were employed after a long time when there were lots of people who were acting for a long time. And stability was brought in, and we started doing the work. But that crumbled, starting 2014. From 2014, it started crumbling again, and there was leadership vacuum. And it continues, and it continued up to now, that there was leadership vacuum, and there's no stability, therefore. And therefore, you're creating a situation where even subordinates themselves are unsure about what is going to be happening to the boss. What this thing does is that for every executive that gets employed, you put up a strategy, then it dissipates. So employees have been subjected to as many of strategies, different strategies, because you come in, you go, somebody else comes in and he comes up with his own strategy, they go, somebody else comes in. So most of the things will end up not being completed, most of the projects. That's what.
Honorable, thank you, sir. Honorable Khoza.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maaso. I think, Chair, on a no, no, let me not say this, but the court has declared the appointment. Okay, no, Chair, but you understand, ne? Okay, no, Chair, you know, there is something that is disturbing me. We have all these brilliant people, the finest brains have come before us to present it to us. And how all of them allowed this man without even a metric to reign over the SABC. Can you shed some light to us on that? Because we need to know what is behind this.
Thank you, Honorable Prof.
I'm not professor, I'm doctor.
Doctor, okay. that they would say, I mean, well, the man has said himself that we overdose ourselves with education, remember? But for me, honorable member, it's I will point everything towards the board, because it's easy to propel a person, because it is the board that is supposed to rein in on the person. But if the board propels them by not taking action, there's nothing much we as executives, because we are, firstly, when the MOI was changed, it gave him all the powers to then purge us officially. So, and secondly, these things happen, the board hears about them, but if the board was very serious, they would have stopped these things and said, we want to ensure that we look at, but they receive information about to, this one has been about leaking, this one, and then they accept, they keep, the fact that it happens and it continues, it means they accept. And for me, as this is the inquiry about their fitness, for me, it is a questionable that they were unable to stop these particular charades because Tina were just victims, as it were. So the charade cannot be stopped. So we try and develop policies, but those policies, if they are not being respected or even approved, so you are always at the mercy of whether today they are happy or not happy about you, or today, somebody came in and said something about you. I mean, this fear that Madam Kosi was talking about is that we all feared. I mean, I wanted to talk to my colleagues. I get out of my office. I talk with them. I would speak to them, whether at a cafe, or because you never know. At certain stages you hear things. I mean, so you also are paranoid. So you're not sure what's going to be a new thing happening the next day. So every day you're always thinking about what's the next thing that's going to be happening.
Can I just confirm something very quickly? Prof. Mogave called you
Yes.
a junior staff member.
No, it
When
was the
you are
COO.
actually-
It was the COO that said,
It's the COO that called you.
Yeah, he said he told Prof that junior staff can't be dealing with his matters.
Oh, okay.
So,
And are you aware that the CEO, all the CEOs that you've had during your tenure were also generalized?
they were generalized, yeah.
Okay, so judging by the high staff turnover, would you agree or would you concur with us that governance at SABC had completely failed?
Certainly, I would concur with that statement. But also that the organization which you try to make an employer of choice or a preferred employer, you put all the efforts to ensure. So all these things are cancelling good things that are happening within the SABC at the top. All the things.
I'm still trying to understand what justified the commission or the bonus that Mr. Motsoneng got out of the multi-choice steel of about 11 million, if I'm not mistaken. What was the basis of that in the absence of some of the policies, the critical policies that we were talking about that never found their way to the board, or that were approved sometime by the board but were never implemented? Now, I need to understand what justified that.
Again, Honourable Member, thank you. I would also point again into the board's inability to execute its what's name. Because for me, if they themselves were still able to sing for their dinner about how wonderful a person this is and how rare this skill is. I mean, you remember that Prof. Dr. Chitsumba used to, whenever he stands up and he says, this man is brought in, this man is done. And once you're thinking that way, you would then agree that anything that comes up and says, this person deserves. For me, I believe that it made it logical for them to say, it's okay, because you're the one that brought this thing to the organization, and therefore you deserve.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ma'am Van Dam?
Thanks, Chair. Can you talk us through the suspension of the former GCO, Mr. Franz Matlala, in November 2015? I'm assuming you would have been involved in the process, seeing as you were the GE for HR. Why was he suspended?
No, certainly I wasn't involved, Honourable Member, junior staff member, so I never gotten involved in these particular matters. I only learned from him 2 days thereafter when he called me.
Okay, so you were not informed as the executive in charge of HR why the CEO was suspended?
No.
And I'm assuming you wouldn't have been involved in any of the ensuing processes where he was handed a golden handshake?
Certainly not.
All right. Now, we know that Mr. Motsoneng's salary has basically increased from between 500,000 to $1 million every year since 2013. Who signed off on those salary increases?
Good. I think it would be the chairperson that should sign off on their salary increases, if there's any. But during my tenure, I can basically vouch the fact that when he was appointed by the board, because I always say it was the board that appointed him as a COO. So the board will come to the board chairperson then came and said, what are the salary ranges that you would pay for a COO? And then we do a benchmark, salary benchmark, and we give, here's the proposed salary scales. And they would make their own decision around.
All right, so they didn't consult the group executive for HR for any of the appointments of...
Not appointments.
Not the appointments, not their salaries, and increasing their salaries every year, awarding bonuses. They wouldn't consult with you as the group executive for human resources.
Well, during my time, he had not gotten any bonus. But all I'm saying is that when he was moved from acting to become permanent, then they came to us and said, what are the salary benchmark? What's the salary benchmark for a COO?
Oh, so that was, sorry. I just want to be clear. That was in 2014 when he was appointed by the minister.
Yes.
And then after that, his salary increased every year by $1 million, between 500,000 and $1 million. You were not involved in those salary increases. You did the first benchmarking, and then the subsequent increases, you were not consulted.
I haven't seen any, save for the adjustment to the conditions of service or something, that the one that we call salary increases for all other staff members. I'm not sure if there was any other thing other than that.
All right. Now, the PricewaterhouseCoopers skills audit report of 2013, which was then discussed in Parliament in 2014, would there be any reason for that document to now suddenly not be something that should be made available to the ad hoc committee? What has happened since then? Has there been any amendments to that report?
No, there hasn't been any amendments in my knowledge, because it was a resident in my office. All that we did, we came here to the Parliament, to the Portfolio Committee, and we gave the original document coming from PwC, and we implemented all the proposed recommendations from that policy we put to. I mean, it was said that we would not be probably ready for a DTT if we do not get people to get certain skills, and we ensure that they will go out and get skills around that area. We've made an effort to ensure that people go for strategic management programs. And I think that, but there's no reason really that it should not come here.
All right. Last question. That PricewaterhouseCoopers report found that 60% of executive and senior management did not meet the minimum strategic thinking skills for executives. Mm. Would you say now, before you left in 2016, that had been met, that had been improved upon, that 60%?
Thank you. I'm unable to confirm about the recent people that were put in. But one thing I can say is that I had joined by the time when the skills audit landed on my desk. I just joined them. But one thing that I noted when I looked at the competency assessments is that most of the people that draw the report downwards were the people who were acting in the positions, and those are people that were not confirmed, and people who come from outside were put into the correct positions. So if you had done that competency assessment again in 2015 or 14, you would have gotten a different picture, certainly, because I went through a competence assessment. Sipho Masinga went through it, Itani went through. So all of the people that were employed around the time after the skills audit did go through a competence assessment, and where they were adjudged to be.
And all those people were removed.
Thank you very much, Honourable Van Dam. That is it. Honourable Mokoena.
No, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't have too many questions, so I'm just going to vent for a little bit. You know, but let me start with the quote that says, "The only thing that is necessary for evil to prevail or to triumph is for good men to do nothing." We're hearing executive after executive saying, "I did not do anything." And this is worrying because we're using the SABC, for me, is a microcosm of a much bigger problem that we're experiencing in this country at this point in time. One, SOEs are deteriorating. The SABC is but one of them. And they deteriorate under the same narrative. Good men stand and do absolutely nothing. We're now having a problem of the political space, society in general. We're becoming a zombified nation. I urge you, sir, and everybody else who's listening, that we need to change this culture. This is not us. This is not South Africans. We come out of a culture of fighting apartheid. We came out of it because we were a fighting nation. It's becoming more and more unacceptable to hear this narrative, "No, we were afraid." Having said that, yeah, I don't have questions for you. Let me ask this though, just for the record. So you're saying that the CEO of the current acting GCEO is being undermined by the COO as we speak?
Well, I'm not certain because because he was appointed when I was not there. But the ones that I know before, I know that they were undermined.
Okay, and then it's also your assertion that the current executive panel is mostly unqualified for their position.
I can't make a comment such
Given the fact that, you know, some of them, they've crossed that pension stage, some of them were recalled from doing nothing. We're in a bad state at the SABC.
Well, we're in a bad state if one was to look at talent pipelining, then we are definitely in a bad space because we were supposed to have pipelined certain individuals to take over so that you recreate SABC itself. It must recreate itself rather than rely on matters of this nature. So there is a sense that there's no confidence in a certain people, meaning African people, because if you look at that, you will see that most of these are white old men. Sorry. But
sure.
Those are white old men who are supposed to have, they left, but we're supposed to have opened space for young African women.
So, and then earlier on you said the only qualification that you need to have in order for you to get a job at the SABC is to fall in line with Mr. Motsoeneng's vision. What is Mr. Motsoeneng's vision?
I'm not sure what it is, but I know that at a particular point of time, when Mr. Matlala came in as a CEO, he took us and said, "We're going for a strategic planning." We went. Those who reported under him went, but those who reported under Mr. Motsoeneng were held back. They didn't pitch up, so the strategic planning session was closed because the strategy. What does he know about strategy? Because strategy belongs to me.
Should we close down SABC for 2 months, re-strategize, redo everything? Because it looks like to me there's nothing there. There's no systems. We don't have qualified people there. There's nothing happening.
It's just a comment, honorable member.
I'm asking.
No, let me
I'm
rescue you.
asking
No, let me rescue you, sir. Your
comment.
time is up.
What is your opinion?
No,
Like,
no, your
what
time is up, sir. Your time is up.
But I was in the middle of asking the
No,
question.
no, no, no. You were ranting about everything else. Your time is up. Mr. Matlango.
Chair, thank you. Sir, what is the required qualification to hold the position of COO?
COO. When I came in, there was the job spec that was advertised at a particular point and abandoned does require a degree. That particular one does require a degree. And I know that at a particular point of time, apparently it was abandoned. That process. It was advertised and then the process wasn't carried forth.
And who botched that process, if I may ask?
I think it was during the times of, if I'm not mistaken, without allocating people to wrong places, but Dr. Ngubane's times, I think, around that time. I think it was around those times.
So you, as a HR head, one would obviously assume that all documentation of the team SA worker are within they're deposited with you.
They are deposited in the, yeah.
And what do you have there according to your recollection of Mr. COO?
No, I only had some, I think, a certificate of attendance at Gibbs and some other, what's that? Yeah, and some other certificates just around that.
So you can't speak with authority that you know your staff member. Do you know the man?
As a person?
I mean, from what you have deposited with you, that you would have about everyone else in your employ. Do you know the person?
Oh, I think the information that in front of me will tell me that this individual has this particular qualification, this individual doesn't have that particular qualification. And I had done a matrix like that. I think at some stage it was required of the portfolio committee from the portfolio, and I did it. And I submitted it to the board for them to send to the portfolio committee to indicate where everyone stands around qualifications.
And where did he stand?
As I indicated, there was those particular certificates.
Okay.
Yes, of attendance. Yes.
Now, earlier on, you indicated that your reporting lines were to the CEO, and who changed it to or diverted it to COO?
It's not changed organization structure-wise. It's not changed. It is operationally like that. You have to come. I mean, we get taken out of meetings. It's ridiculous when you're sitting with your senior team member and you're busy with a meeting with your senior team members, and then you get a note from 27th floor to come up. And when you say, I'm still busy, you leave them to go, and then you say, I'm still busy. Then and the next note will come and say, urgently. I mean, so you get out of that meeting. So essentially what I'm saying is that if I were to complain to my line manager, who is the CEO, and say, but I'm being dragged out of meetings that are very critical for my team and for us to do work, where would that put me? Because all of them, I'm not sure whether they're acting at the behest of the man.
So you all feared him, in a way?
If we were to put it that way, yes. I mean, I think he's a very powerful man. He's powerful if he cannot be called to order by the board. For us as executives, so it made it that we are unable. Therefore, we don't have a cushion, and it made it worse when the MOI gave the authority for them to run disciplinary hearings. So that we knew, and that's why Mr. Sipho Masinga was fighting very hard around this issue of MOI, because we know where it was heading for. It was heading for what we have now.
Yeah, we will speak to him later.
Yeah.
And who is the current CEO?
It's Mr. James Aguma.
And who is he?
He's a former AG auditor, I think there, and then he came into the organization. Mr. Mtswenyang, I think, took him when he saw him in the AG, and they took him into his office to deal with issues of qualification. Because remember, at some stage, the organization had qualifications, and so he was going to advise the organization around that. And then he became a CFO, and now he's acting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Honorable Swartz.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Maaso, for your time. You indicated that Mr. Motsoeneng is a very powerful person and is not being called to order by the board. Why would you think that is so? Do you think that he believes he has political support from the highest level, and that is a reason why he need not be held accountable to the board? And when I mean that, I mean from the president's side.
Well, I'm not sure if I were to go by what the media says. The minister herself said Baba loves him, so I'm not certain. But the one thing I can say, though, is that even that board was divided. You will see that the people that became sort of victims were Mavusos, the Prof. Kumalos, and so the board itself got divided around allegiances. And once you have that, then it basically cascades downwards. And that's how the good old tactic of divide and rule works.
Thank you, Mr. Bar. And we do see that some board members have taken a strong stance,
yes,
and have resigned, and besides those that were fired. But can I just ask you, as your in charge of human resources, the Public Protector's report, when it came out, and the implementation of the report, there was a lot said about personnel, about human resources. We also heard from Ms. Nkosi about the challenges she had, and she was reporting directly to you. So just those challenges. Firstly, let me just read again what I read to her. One of the findings of the Public Protector's report was that Mr. Motsoeneng purged senior staff members, leading to the loss of millions of rands on unnecessary settlements for irregular terminations of contracts of employment. Now, when we put the question to Ms. Nkosi as to the amounts involved, she said large amounts, but here we see the findings are millions. And I think it was also put 121 million or something. So obviously that must have been a big concern to you from human resources side. What were you able to do about that issue and the implementation of the Public Protector's report?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think the first thing that I could say, maybe on my part, without implementing the Public Protector's recommendation, when I came in and I wanted to review policies, for me, it was part of that, of ensuring that there are checks and balances in the whole system, because I could see holes in many of the other areas that could lead to some of these things. For instance, you needed to do job evaluation. If there's no job evaluation policy, so it's easy for line managers, when they like you, they can push the job upwards. So you need a job evaluation policy. So it's all of these things that could have avoided some of the situations that we find in that Public Protector's report, that there was no job evaluation policy. There was a system, but there was no policy. So in terms of the Public Protector's report, I did not play any part in the organization. Neither was I ever asked to come and assist whether the board or what's the name. The only role that I was called in to come and play was when I got a letter coming from the attorneys that they had appointed to come up and become a witness on behalf of the company. It was surprising because I was still new. I wasn't there at the time at which this thing happened, but I went into the hearing. Yeah.
Sorry, just clarify, what hearing are you referring
This
to?
disciplinary hearing. His disciplinary hearing.
Yes.
Member of Mr. Mtsweneng.
Yes, and
Yes.
I'm sorry, were you, so you played no role, it was an outside organization?
It was an outside organization.
And were you aware that the attorney worksmans were involved in that and then they withdrew from that process?
I'm aware that they withdrew,
And have you any
because I saw it in the newspaper also that.
And you don't know why
that
they withdrew at all?
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they know, but speculation has it that Mr. Sandile July, who's a very reputable labor relations person, took the public protector's report and looked at it in depth, and then started compiling charges. And I think it didn't sit well with the people that appointed her, because he went broadly. So, and they wanted him to zoom into 3. So he went broadly. So
Interesting. Mr. Maaso, we also now know that the public protector...
Thank you very much.
Just a quick one, and that was the public protector had a file that would have assisted the disciplinary hearing, and that file was never used. Would you have any knowledge of that?
I'm not allowing you to answer that one, because he's defying me. You're really coming to corrupt our meeting here. We'll start with you and then we'll end. No, Ms. Killian, yes.
Thank you, Chairperson, as long as you don't penalize me. Chairperson, can I just ask, Mr. Maaso, thank you very much. You're really assisting us greatly. I just wanted to understand, you indicated earlier that the COO had immense authority. Now, can you talk us through the progression of the person who was last when this document was published? Maybe she changed the position by now again. She was GE Sport, Ms. Suli Motsweni. Public Protector found how she moved through the paces. Do you have any background to her progression through the system? And were there ever, in your tenure, was there any proper sort of adverts placed for positions to invite applications?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'm not privy to the previous one where there were salaries increased, where she became. The one that I know is where she became a group executive of corporate affairs. There was a process followed because I was there, so we advertised the position. She applied and she got the job. That one I'm certain of it. I'm not sure about this sports one because I was already gone when they did the sports. When they maneuvered the chessboard to open the space for corporate affairs, so I wasn't there.
Were you aware that there was a position that was filled, and after a due process, obviously you should have been aware, by Ms. Bessie Tugwana, can you please talk us through how Mr. Motsweneng went back into the position he held before, after the findings of the court, and that is to the position of stakeholder relations and provinces or whatever the position was called?
Yeah. No, I had already left. I had indicated earlier around that. I mean, I had left when he went back to that position. But what I indicated clearly is that there is nothing in the policy that says you reserve positions for people that should wait for them to come back, and when the circumstances require that they come back. So there is no ad hominem positions in the SABC. Thank you.
Then lastly, Chairperson, you made several comments about the MOI, Memorandum of Incorporation. Tell us what exactly in the Memorandum of Incorporation, and quite frankly, I don't know how many there are. Are you aware of how many changes there were? We have a copy of 2014. There's also now a 2016 document. What was the intention of the amendments to the Memorandum of Incorporation? And to what extent did it undermine statutory provisions?
I'm unable to comment on the latter part of statutory provisions, but what I can say, for, as I indicated, for us, it was going to be a game changer around the issues of disciplining and around the issues of power, because then the power was shifted from the board on dealing with the issues of discipline. So people could be cushioned around purging. So purging was very easy now when it goes down to that level. Because I'm not saying if there were, but if there's an executive that has all the time has agendas, because you do not toe my line, you're not doing your work, but you do not toe. It's easy for them to always find something that they will always try and find something for you to then do.
Chair, can I just slip in one question, and that is the staff files. The public protector found that there was some miraculous amendments made to some of the staff files held at that time. Under your tenure, did you sort of bring about specific provisions to make sure that staff couldn't have access to files, documents couldn't disappear miraculously, etc.?
Yes, I certainly created what they call HR shared services, where the files now were going to be kept, and those of the executives were kept in my office in a safe, so to ensure that people do not. And the other copies were then with the HR shared services, so to ensure that there is no. Now, I'm unable also to tell you something that can happen when I leave the office, because there is a likelihood that anything can happen when you leave the office. When you go home and you're going to come back the next day, so you can't guarantee that somebody did not get into your office. So,
thank you very much, sir. Mr. Honorable Chauke.
Now, thank you very much again, Chair. My points are just going to be two. One is your understanding, your PFMA, especially when it comes to issues of fruitless and wasteful expenditures, vis-a-vis these irregular appointments. And what does these irregular appointments constitute? That's my first point. I mean, in line with PFMA, yes. Are you agreeing with me that maybe you can just elaborate further on these appointments that are irregular? Because there's a point that I want to drive home.
Definitely. Firstly, I think I will agree that if we have people who get employed through a process, because the process itself is costly by itself, because you have to place adverts, there's time and everything, and then people then get removed. Then you replace them with other people. So it's another process that you have to go through. So for me, those are issues of fruitless expense that can come in. The irregular appointments, definitely, because they get challenged. In some other instances, people win, and once they win against the organization, it costs the organization money. So certainly, when there is no following of processes, it means the likelihood is that we're going to lose out, because we have to pay legal fees. We have to, again, replace an individual. I mean, there is an individual, Mr. Hosea Chiane. He was harassed, I hear. He was very traumatized when he tells me the story. He left somewhere around 29 or 2009, a very much harassed guy. He stayed very long outside of the organization fighting. He was reinstated in 2015 by the labor court. And we had to pay him. We pay back all that, the salary that he would have gotten. And then we had to pay him and find a position. So I had to find a position and put him in a position. So for me, those are fruitless expenses. But who do they go to? Who accounts for it? Because if you were to ask who paged that guy, who pushed that guy out, I'm sure people would be able to only tell you when you are at the parking lot chatting to them.
Thank you very much, Chair. obvious, having now a broken the law with regard to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, PFMA then directs us what we then must do. There are three things that we do. One is to investigate.
Yeah.
Two is to recover. Now, that recover is very detailed, meaning that even if it's a 11 million rand paid to Motsweneng, if it's irregular, it had to be recovered. Every single cent of the state, meaning that that public money, will have to be covered. At the end, it means that action must be taken. Do you agree with me that if we are to follow PFMA to the latter, we'll be able to recover the money that SABC has lost?
Oh, I agree with you, Honorable Member, and I'm sure the GCO, who I would imagine maybe is part of that decision, as an auditor himself, I'm sure he would agree at that particular point that he has somebody has got to pay. He knows the PFMA to the letter, so he should know better that at that particular point, when it reaches that point, this is what must happen.
My last point, yes, Chair, is that now with the full understanding of what is happening at SABC, you are now in front of the ad hoc committee. What is it that you can, in fact, advise as the way forward, based on your understanding and the challenges that you have observed as a senior human rights practitioner, I mean, a HR person? What will you advise, taking from the points of your understanding?
At that particular point of time, when the interim board gets appointed, needs to clean up issues of policies. Policies must be approved, all of them, the ones that needs to be approved, and ensure that they are implemented. I think it's important. But also to look at whether there's a redundancy of staff in other areas where there's no need. Because we never know, maybe certain individuals had been put in there for certain other agendas. And to ensure that we professionalize the organization by getting the right people who have the right skills at the right time, and they've got the necessary qualifications and can do the work. Of course, the organization is a very dynamic one, and it requires that we distinguish between freelancers and permanent employees, so that the freelance does not get used as a backdoor for getting people into the organization. And if freelancers are qualified, they will apply when we advertise the positions. So I think it's critical, but also to ensure that HR is not made back to personnel administration and management only, where you need to make it a strategic partner to ensure that all things are done in a proper way. And this particular moment, it was just, if you those who do law, you know that you have a lucid interval. If you're saying all things have been madness, and then there's this particular small and lucid interval where you feel, whew, what a relief. Was a relief at the time of Mr. Matlala. When he came, he understood all of the things, and I could feel that now I'm going to be doing my real work as an HR executive to advise the board. I had already done a transformation strategy at a particular point. That also is approved by the board, by the way, but it has not been implemented because it must fit into a particular agenda, so it didn't. So you require that you deal with these particular notions, and so that you don't keep more must be removed, must be revised to ensure that there is a checks and balances. Otherwise, you will have this thing. Even any other person, I'm not sure, maybe they will end up also using it to that they can purge people easily.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Maaso, you know, you and it was your right. It was your right to request that your submission be done in camera. And we didn't accede to it as the committee. But the more I sat here and I listened, the more it made sense, or I'm convinced that, you know, the national cause is more noble than the personal cause. It might have brought you some personal questions, but I think South Africans are better informed because we insisted you do this thing publicly. So we want to thank you for first of all acceding to eventually changing your mind to do it publicly. And I think that has helped all of us, not just the committee, but South Africa Incorporated. So we finish our business on the 20th. No. Is there anybody from the SABC that wants to raise questions? So we finish our business on the 28th of February, at least that's what we envisage. So between now and the 28th of February, if there's something that you'd like to share that we didn't afford you the time to, please communicate with us. We will then communicate it with the rest of the committee and incorporate it. Once again, thank you very much for coming. May your Christmas be a blessed one, and may your New Year be as prosperous as you'd like it to be. Honourable members, we will return here at 2 o'clock, and we will then be interacting with Mr. Masinga, who is a former Group Executive Technology. Once again, thank you, Mr. Maaso.